Imagine this. Your peaceful days working as an apothecary comes to an end when you're kidnapped by some men. Sold to the emperor, you spend your days as a lowly servant doing menial chores to care for his concubines, until one day the palace manager discovers your apothecary talents. Now you must serve one of the emperor's royal consorts, the mother of his child, as her personal taste tester for poisons, and uncover the truth about mysterious occurrences within the palace, or face execution by the emperor. This is the story of The Apothecary Diaries. So let's get started and watch the story unfold. A young apothecary girl picking flowers and herbs is sent by her father to deliver some medicine to the verdigris house. He warns her to be careful on her way there, as kidnappings of women are on the rise. The girl, Mau Mau, claims she'll be fine. She just wants to stop by an herb plot on her way back. She runs through the busy red light district, making her way into the verdigris house, a well-established brothel. Pyrin, one of the most famous courtesans of the brothel, enters, concerned about Mau Mau's wounds on her arm. Mau Mau thinks nothing of it. It's just one of her usual drug experiments. The owner of the house, the madam, then enters, scolding Mau Mau, telling her she better not be setting off explosions again from her so-called experiments. But when the madam offers Mau Mau courtesan lessons, Mau Mau storms out, leaving the meds she was sent to deliver behind for the madam. Outside the district, in a field, the sight of herbs makes Mau Mau light up like a cat, and she picks away with cheer. But it seems the cheer is over, with 3 men here to kidnap her. Now, being escorted through a basket, she knows her father will be worried. 3 months pass, with Mau Mau working, having been sold as a servant to the emperor's rear palace, a place with a garden of women who are to give birth to the emperor's children. No men are allowed, only the emperor, his kin, and eunuchs, which are men that have been castrated. Overall, the place is a huge collective of 2,000 concubines and servants, and 1,000 eunuchs. And unlike the concubines, servant girls like Mau Mau are expendable and can lose their lives at any moment. Well, at least she gets paid. Xiaolan, one of Mau Mau's friends, comes here teary-eyed, asking which room this plate is for. When Mau Mau directs her, we learn most of the servant girls are illiterate, just taught the bare minimum essentials of etiquette. However, Mau Mau has no intention of sharing that she can read or write, as all her hard-earned work would just be paid to her kidnappers. Now, she could be given even better treatment as a concubine, but the requirements are good looks. Unfortunately, her freckles, flat chest, and skin and bones look makes her unqualified for the job. She would rather not stand out, as her life would be at risk. All she has to do is work hard, and in 2 years, she'll be allowed to leave. While doing laundry, Xiaolan whispers rumors of a hot eunuch, one who's very popular with all the women. Later, in the dining hall, Xiaolan discusses the rumors of the curse here in the rear palace, a curse that kills all the emperor's heirs born here. So far, all 3 of the emperor's children born here have grown weak and passed away. A doctor went to visit both precious consorts, Lady Gyokyo and Lady Lihua. With no heirs previously, Lady Lihua, giving birth to the prince, could give her the title of Empress Consort, and thus should have priority here in the rear palace. But there's a rumor that the emperor actually favors Lady Gyokyo. Apparently, both mothers and child are sick, with head, stomach aches, and nausea. Hearing this gets Mau Mau's apothecary brain kicking. While working later, she considers the possibility of poison, illness, and even hereditary issues, and gets curious enough to want to take a quick peek at their conditions. Entering the area where all the high-ranked concubines reside, she notices every building pavilion to be exquisite, even down to the individual pillars. She suddenly hears the sound of a smack, watching the public spectacle of Lady Lihua, who had just finished smacking Lady Gyokyo onto the ground, blaming Gyokyo for cursing her son because Gyokyo bore a daughter. Gyokyo responds the idea to be absurd, as her daughter Lingli is sick as well. As the two bicker, Mau Mau thinks the flustered eunuch in the middle to be a quack of a physician. How hasn't he noticed the cause of their ailments when she herself has figured it out with just a single look? Putting all the pieces of information together, especially now seeing how worn out Lady Lihua is, this certainly is no curse. As she wanders out of the crowd, pondering how to tell the 2 precious consorts, she utters the words, "If only I could find something to write with." with the manager of the rear palace, Jin Shi, taken aback hearing those words. Though turning to see who said them, he finds no one. In her quarters, Lady Li Hua finds an important message in a flower, but ends up tossing it aside. A dark night of terror comes as Lady Li Hua cries at the death of her son, the young prince. A little under a month later, as everyone continued their work in the palace, they wore black sashes to mourn the passing of the prince heir. In Lady Gyokyuyo's quarters, Jin Shi hears from her that when she visited the crystal pavilion to have her daughter examined, she had found a note on the windowsill tied to a branch with the words, "The white face powder is poison. Don't let the baby touch it." Both Gyokyuyo and Jin Shi knew it wasn't from the palace physician. After all, he couldn't figure out how to treat the prince. And thus, Jin Shi is now tasked with finding who wrote the note. He smirks, remembering a young servant girl who was literate had passed by him in the crystal pavilion. On another day, the young servant girls are summoned by the high officials, and when Jin Shi enters, all the girls blush and gawk at him. Except for Mao Mao, who wonders who this arrogant-looking woman is. He presents himself as the rear palace manager, and Mao Mao is surprised that a man so handsome as him is a eunuch, because now he can't have any children. Jin Shi then holds up a sign that reads, "You, with the freckles, stay here." Mao Mao reads it slowly, and oh no, everyone begins to notice her. Jin Shi then tells everyone to return to their rooms as he's done with them for the day. Oh man, she's the only servant here who can read. He wrote that just now to single her out. She tries to escape, but Jin Shi has no intention of letting her leave. As they walk together, he remarks it was odd after looking her up, because her description said that she couldn't read. Mao Mao tries to play it off with a meek tone, saying, "I'm of lowly birth. It must be a mistake," determined to never admit it, as pretending to be ignorant makes everything in this world easier. She gets annoyed, wondering how Jin Shi found out about the messages. The two make it to Lady Gyokyuyo's room, and with the awing of happy little baby Ling Li, Mao Mao feels relieved. Gyokyuyo thanks Mao Mao as her baby's savior, but Mao Mao denies these actions as she doesn't want to get involved. However, Jin Shi pulls out the note received by Gyokyuyo. It's written on a fabric used in the clothing for serving girls. Did Mao Mao perhaps rip apart her skirt? Making Mao Mao jump back, covering her backside, knowing she's been caught. Jin Shi then has her explain why she put the flower on the windowsill that day. In a more serious tone, Mao Mao describes that she figured out the makeup powder both Gyokyuyo and Li Hua had been using was poisoned. Many courtesans used high-end powder in the brothels she grew up in, which had poisoned many of them, causing so many to lose their lives. Trading life for beauty, but losing both. A grim sight. Having worked as an apothecary, she tells the two she knows a few things about poisons. Gyokyuyo shows the white powder. It was used by the baby's nurse, who described the whitening to be better compared to other powders. Gyokyuyo blamed herself, as she should have paid more attention to the things going on to her baby. Jin Shi took blame as well, thinking if he had noticed sooner, more lives could have been saved, including Lady Li Hua's baby. Gyokyuyo tried to tell Li Hua about the message, but sadly, Li Hua wouldn't believe her. Given all that, Mao Mao wonders what her purpose here is. Well, starting today, she is now Gyokyuyo's lady-in-waiting. Huh? As she leaves, she thinks, no. She can't keep a low profile now. As some Imperial soldiers rest for the evening, two fall over. Have they been poisoned? Jin Shi reads a report learning food was cooked by the villagers to serve to the soldiers, and suspected with the crime of aiding barbarians to harm the Emperor's legion, the village leader was placed into custody. Gao Shun, Jin Shi's attendant, changes the subject, asking about concubine Gyokyuyo's new lady-in-waiting, Mao Mao. Jin Shi explains his reasoning to be Gyokyuyo only has 4 women serving her, too few compared to concubine Li Hua, with the same rank having 10 women serving her. This is not necessarily due to Li Hua being given special favor, but really because Gyokyuyo is wise and cautious, and would never hire someone of unknown origin. That is the best way to survive as one of the Emperor's concubines. Jin Shi found Mao Mao to be the perfect choice as a new lady-in-waiting. Her knowledge of medicine is too valuable to pass up. Gao Shun has some concern that she could abuse that knowledge. However, Jin Shi plans on seducing her a little, to keep her wrapped around his fingers. As Mao Mao grabs her stuff to move out, she and Xiaolan spot Jinshi playing with some of the concubines. He comes over to Mao Mao, prompting her to ask if he needs anything. Upon hearing he doesn't, she wonders why he's here. Does he just have nothing better to do? He then caresses her hair with his hand, softly telling her to serve Lady Gyokyo well. But this has the opposite effect on her, creeping Mao Mao out and making her feel disgusted. She then arrives at the Jade Pavilion and is greeted by Gyokyo's head lady-in-waiting, Hong Yan. They meet with Lady Gyokyo and Ling Li, who are both joyous to see Mao Mao. Hong Yan then shows Mao Mao around the various stations she'll be working at, until they reach the living room where they meet the 3 other ladies-in-waiting, Yinghua, Guiyan, and Ailan. But the 3 girls are taken aback seeing Mao Mao's bandages. Mao Mao tries to start helping out, but the 3 girls tell her to go rest up and take it easy, getting teary-eyed, explaining that Mao Mao has a special task coming up. After Mao Mao leaves, the girls worry Mao Mao must have gotten abused back at home, and now being given a terrible job, they feel so bad for her. The terrible job is being Gyokyo's official taste tester for poison, which gets Mao Mao excited like a cat again. I don't think you're supposed to be happy about that. Jinshi explains the food made for concubines changes hands a few times before being brought here, leaving possible time to be poisoned before arrival. In fact, when Gyokyo was pregnant, her food had been poisoned at least twice. The taster back then received nerve damage and still can't move her hands or feet, which is why the current ladies-in-waiting are sympathetic towards Mao Mao. She then begins the food tasting, detecting no poison. Back when she lived in the brothels, she ran a lot of experiments on her arm, gradually training her body's immunity towards poisons. Many of them don't even affect her, but she's pleased to be able to get some good food, making Jinshi nervous hearing her laugh. Later, Hong Yan praises her skill, mentioning to Mao Mao if she had said she was literate from the get-go, she could have been getting paid more this entire time. However, Mao Mao explains that her kidnappers would receive part of the increased pay, and she wouldn't like that. Hearing this, Hong Yan goes to hand Mao Mao an expensive vase, and makes it drop. It's so expensive, Mao Mao could not possibly afford it with her lady-in-waiting salary, and feigns her scheme, saying they'd probably have to charge her kidnappers for the damages, to which Mao Mao catches on very quickly. Hong Yan then hands Mao Mao her hazard pay for the food tasting services, payment almost equal to her regular stipend that only goes to Mao Mao. The next day, Mao Mao learns quickly that she'll get shoved out for any work other than Gyokyo's meals. This consequently leaves her bored out of her mind. On a particular day though, Jinshi needs her assistance, but with her usual look towards him, he wonders why his charms don't seem to work on her. He hands her the test materials, some bao zup buns, and upon smelling, she announces there is an aphrodisiac within them, surprising Jinshi that she can smell even without tasting. Jinshi already knew that, however, making Mao Mao disgusted in disbelief that he'd try to have her eat one, getting Lady Gyokyo to crack out laughing in tears over the ridiculous exchange. Jinshi then starts to discuss the real reason he brought her here. He discusses the squad of soldiers on a mission to attack some barbarians that were poisoned the other day. They'd fallen ill after a meal, reporting nausea, difficulty breathing, and other ailments. The meal had been prepared in a nearby village, and the soldiers arrested the village leader on conspiracy charges. Luckily, an officer defused the situation and has put the village head's sentence on hold until they get to the bottom of how the poisoning occurred. Mao Mao ponders this until it comes to her. She learns from Jinshi the meal was eaten at a camp outside, and that the soldiers used their own plates and utensils. With that evidence, she pulls a rhododendron flower out from the vase behind her, tasting it while telling them it actually causes nausea and difficulty breathing. The plant has poisons in the leaves, but some have poisons in the branches or roots. Some wood can even emit poison when burned, and with that, Jinshi has learned it was most likely the wood the soldiers were burning. Case closed. However, he isn't done with Mao Mao yet. He wants her to make an aphrodisiac, which gets her excited at the idea of doing her apothecary work again. She eventually composes herself and agrees to work. But in Jinshi's office, he discusses with Gao Shun about how one of the reasons he's been employed here is to test the loyalty of all the servants and concubines against their temptation, as a concubine must especially be loyal to the emperor and chaste. However, with Mao Mao's glare of disgust, Jinshi feels super elated? What is wrong with this guy? The next day, Mao Mao gets excited to begin her apothecary work, meeting with the quack doctor and Gao Shun. She then lights up when presented with the supply room. she begins to work, but gets annoyed with Jinshi on her back. With the main ingredients of milk, butter, sugar, honey, and powdered cacao, she preps some chocolate to cool and harden, but also some extra for herself later that she stores on a shelf. While waiting outside for the chocolates to cool, she gets distracted by herbs outside, getting carried away till the evening, returning to find her 3 associate ladies in waiting immersed after eating the aphrodisiacs. Well, at least we know they work. However, Hong Yan gives Mao Mao a scolding smack. Later that night, Mao Mao presents the aphrodisiacs, with everyone in shock learning she's going to keep the bigger ones for herself as midnight snacks. Jinshi makes a joke about eating one to test, making Mao Mao think he'd captivate anyone with his blushed face that's so pretty. After the display, Jinshi caresses Mao Mao's hair from behind, telling her she did a good job, thanking her before taking off. In the night, a young servant girl spots a white, ghostly woman. When the woman approaches, the girl cowers in terror upon the sight of the creepy being. On another day, in the Jade Pavilion kitchen area, as Mao Mao prepares cold medicine, Yinghua tells her about the rumor of a spirit haunting the rear palace. And later, Xiaolan confirms the famous ghostly lady in white to her. A ghostly lady who dances in the air under the moonlight, often appearing on the eastern castle walls. Mao Mao ponders this, knowing the only way to enter is through one of 4 gates, located in north, south, east, and west. And even then, it'd be difficult to break in with the gates always guarded and the wall surrounded by a moat. They say, however, that sunken in the moats are the corpses of concubines who tried to escape. Mao Mao thinks nothing of this superstition, but Xiaolan is certainly freaked out. In the physician's building, as the court physician Guan is about to serve treats to Mao Mao, Jinshi appears, making Guan pull away to grab more. Jinshi comes to praise her work, making her think once again that he probably has nothing better to do. She wonders how he has the authority to wander around like he's palace security. Oh, she then surmises he must be the emperor's personal favorite. Making him catch on immediately, she's thinking something inappropriate. He asks Mao Mao if she's heard about the spirit haunting, and then how it might relate to sleepwalking, which catches Mao Mao's attention. Upon asking for a cure for it, Mao Mao answers there's no medicine that cures somnambulism. However, Jinshi is persistent that she look into it. At night, Gao Shun guides Mao Mao to the eastern wall, where concubine Fu Yu dances under the moonlight. She's a mid-ranking concubine, scheduled to be bestowed to a military officer as a reward. Later, Guan explains Fu Yu had stumbled 2 years ago when showing her dancing skills to the emperor, and thus, he hasn't laid a finger on her, and she shut herself in ever since. Mao Mao thinks the shame and failure might be the cause of Fu Yu's sleepwalking, but holds out to gather more evidence. As Mao Mao turns to leave, Guan mentions Fu Yu is a princess from a small vassal state, and hopes she gets better because he's sure she doesn't want to go back, which is exactly where she's being sent. She and Gao Shun spy on Lady Fu Yu, and compare her to the cotton rose, a large white flower in the morning that turns a deep pink in the evening. Mao Mao learns from Xiaolan that during Fu Yu's sleepwalks, she used to appear in the north, but now has shifted to the eastern wall, giving Mao Mao the final clue to the puzzle. But she doesn't like this, since her dad always told her not to conclude things based on speculation. She later explains her thoughts at the Jade Pavilion, that back at the brothels, there was a skilled courtesan who had received a purchase offer. However, the offer fell through and she started roaming the brothel at night, as if possessed by a demonic spirit, possibly due to stress, but having no recollection of the night before. Eventually, she was bought off and the sleepwalking stopped. Gyokyo concludes that the courtesan didn't want to get sold off. The offer was made by a wealthy merchant who had a wife and even grandchildren. Also, the particular courtesan only had 1 year left on her serving term, leaving everyone to wonder if Fu Yu was in a similar situation. From that day, Fu Yu was forbidden from leaving her room, with eunuchs placed to watch her. Eventually, the day for Lady Fu Yu to be sent to marry the military officer came. However, Gyokyo asked Mao Mao for the truth, suspecting there was more to what she had told them earlier. They agree to keep her speculation secret, and Mao Mao explains there was actually another courtesan whose purchase offer was called off for the same reason as the first one she mentioned. However, this courtesan later received another purchase offer, but since she was deemed ill due to sleepwalking, the price was cut in half. It was all fraud, however. The 2 men who made purchase offers knew each other. The woman pretended to be sick to call off the first offer. Then the real purchaser made a bid at half the price, as a way for the courtesan to be with a man she loved who could afford her purchase price. Mao Mao thinks Fu Yu is in a similar situation, being that she and the military officer are childhood friends that grew up in the same homeland. This officer showed his valor in a battle against barbarians the other day, and when asked for a reward, he strongly insisted on receiving concubine Fu Yu. As a military officer, he could never think of proposing to a princess. But with Fu Yu being pulled into the rear palace, and her possibly having feelings for her childhood friend, she might have purposely failed at her first dance in front of the emperor, and thus the emperor never touched her, leaving her body pure. That being said, with her being given away, the emperor could have still found interest in her, so she must have feigned somnambulism to avoid his interest. The battles with the barbarians happened in the east, so Fu Yu must have danced on the eastern wall as a prayer for his safe return, but it's all speculation. However, we get to see Lady Fu Yu blushed face to face with the man of her dreams, and upon watching the two lovers, Gyokyo mentions her envy of her. On another day, we see concubine Li Hua's ladies-in-waiting berating Mao Mao for trying to serve their lady non-luxurious food. She never would have come to the Crystal Pavilion, but unfortunately, the other day when she had done taste testing in front of the emperor had a personal request for the famous apothecary. With concubine Li Hua unwell, he wanted Mao Mao to cure what ails her. In this country, the word of the emperor is the word of the heavens. Were she to decline, that would be grounds enough for beheading, so she accepted. However, Mao Mao found it incredible for Li Hua's ladies to treat her like this, despite her being on imperial order. Well, they probably just hate her because she's a servant of Lady Gyokyo, and with that, she gets quickly thrown out. In the lunch hall, Xiaolan discusses how Lady Li Hua must still be sick from the white powder, even though it's been banned from the palace entirely. She congratulates Mao Mao on getting orders directly from the emperor himself, but all Mao Mao thinks is that the emperor must really not trust the court physician. We then move to the palace kitchen area, because in looking after Lady Li Hua, the first thing Mao Mao set out to do was improve her diet. First, the poison needed to be expelled from her body, so she needed to consume porridge with lots of fiber. She would attempt to bring another meal to Li Hua, only to get scolded by her ladies again, telling her this is no place for lowly girls like herself, getting Mao Mao kicked out once again. On another attempt, Mao Mao sees the incredibly rich food being brought by Li Hua's ladies. Even noting their nutritional value, those foods are too heavy for a sick person's weakened stomach. They tried feeding Li Hua, and Mao Mao was absolutely right, seeing the sickly concubine choke on the food, needing it to be washed down with water. The ladies blame Mao Mao for ruining the atmosphere, so she gets thrown out again. Except this time, Jin Shi and Gao Shun spot the occurrence. Another day goes by, with Mao Mao wondering how long until she's beheaded for her inability to complete her task. But this time, Jin Shi is here to help her. He tells Li Hua's ladies-in-waiting that it's not befitting of beautiful and talented ladies like you to ignore the emperor's arrangements, hitting them with the Jin Shi signature charms. Mao Mao finally brings some food to Li Hua, now realizing she still has the will to eat, despite the depression from losing her son. She wipes Li Hua's face, noticing the white powder come off. Oh no, it's the same white powder from before. Mao Mao then goes up to the lady-in-waiting that's in charge of Li Hua's makeup, and with a glaring look, she smacks the lady onto the ground. Oh my god! Mao Mao is perfectly justified, because she's punishing this idiot, as she begins dragging this girl and dumps the banned powder all over her. Mao Mao gets down, coldly telling the woman that the poison would infect her whole body after a while, and she should be glad because she'll still look pretty too, just like her beloved Lady Li Hua. Pale, bloodless skin, sunken eye sockets, a body unable to even eat. How come this fool couldn't understand why this stuff was banned? With Mao Mao dragging the woman to look directly at her sickly master, and pulling her back face to face with Mao Mao, Mao Mao berated her for having no thoughts in her head. With the woman now teary-eyed, Mao Mao yelled at her, asking who would be happy to be poisoned with the same thing that killed their son. Mao Mao then commanded the other ladies with authority to clean this mess on the floor. Afterwards, Mao Mao began taking care of Li Hua every day, while the one who had hid the powder was put in confinement, and the eunuch who was to retrieve the powder was punished by flagellation. One day, with Mao Mao by her side, Lady Li Hua asked her why she didn't just let her die, to which Mao Mao plainly responded if she truly wanted to die, she could have just stopped eating. She eats because in truth, she wants to live. Li Hua reminisces about her deceased baby boy, realizing the truth to this. The days continue with Mao Mao's treatment of Lady Li Hua, and one day, the lady who had been in charge of the makeup was released from confinement. She assured Mao Mao she'd never make that mistake again, telling Mao Mao she'll take over so that Mao Mao could finally rest. With her finally being able to serve her master again, Li Hua's lady-in-waiting shed tears of joy at her recovery. And after about 2 months, Lady Li Hua was able to walk by herself again. And with Mao Mao now finally able to rest, Lady Li Hua came by to caress and appreciate her savior. The day came for Mao Mao to finally leave the Crystal Pavilion. Li Hua asked her if she's incapable of birthing another child. When Mao Mao responded she didn't know and that Li Hua should try again, Li Hua answered back that the Emperor's love for her is gone, only for Mao Mao to explain the Emperor had sent her directly. So, Mao Mao believes the Emperor will visit Li Hua soon. Even after hearing this, Li Hua wondered how she could ever beat Lady Gyokyo. However, Mao Mao answered, "It's not a matter of winning and losing. There are hundreds, thousands of flowers in the world, but who can decide whether a peony or a bellflower is more beautiful?" To which Li Hua answers she has neither jade eyes or bright hair. But Mao Mao can see Li Hua has other assets. With sheer size and magnificent shape, Mao Mao then tells Li Hua about a secret technique she learned from women at the brothel house, involving these assets, which leaves Li Hua flushing red. Unfortunately, Mao Mao doesn't have the right figure for something like that. Wooden swords clash as Jin Shi spars with one of his attendants, Ba Sen, Jin Shi being the victor. While getting scrubbed down afterwards, Jin Shi asks Gao Shun how Mao Mao is doing, remembering the unexpected sight of Mao Mao slapping and scolding Li Hua's makeup lady. Elsewhere, Mao Mao has lunch with Xiao Lan, who explains there's a rumor of a palace servant who was able to seduce a military officer that was famous for hating women, with Xiao Lan whispering, "They say she used an aphrodisiac," making Mao Mao nervous, remembering the ones she gave to Jin Shi. In the physician's building, Mao Mao shows Guan some fresh matsutake mushrooms, to which the two enjoy grilled with soy sauce. However, a shaken man barges in, asking if they can make a medicine that cures curses, and then presents his hands to have disgustingly red blotches. But Mao Mao identifies them as just rashes. Probably ointment would do fine. So as she prepares some, the man speaks of the curse that began 2 nights ago. Trash from the rear palace gets burned in a pit on the west side. The man was doing his usual work and found some weird writing tablets. He tossed them in the trash and the fire illuminated in different colors. Then upon looking at his hands, he saw them suddenly cursed. Mao Mao then began sticking one of these tablets into a fire and changed the color by sprinkling different materials onto it, explaining this is like how fireworks work. She then explains what's on his hand is no curse, but simply that there was material on the tablets that night that gave him a rash. So with that, she hands him his ointment cure. Jin Shi then enters to applaud Mao Mao's work. He takes her to learn more about the burning tablets, and orders Gao Shun to find anyone else with the rashes. As Mao Mao wanders away, she surmises the colored wood tablets are most likely some kind of code. Back in the Jade Pavilion, the ladies-in-waiting get Mao Mao dressed up for the garden party. Twice a year, the Emperor and his high officials gather in the courtyard to enjoy food and entertainment. Since the Emperor is unmarried and has no princess consorts, it is customary to bring the upper first-rank concubines, the 4 high-ranking concubines who are the best contenders for Empress consorts. There is no particular task to complete at the event. They're just invited guests who must follow the Emperor. Yinghua gets fired up, with this being Princess Ling Li's first public appearance. And with this being a rare event with all 4 high-ranking concubines, it's going to be an all-out war to show which is best. Later, Gao Shun reports not finding anyone with the rash burns on their arms, so they can only hope things go smoothly at the garden party tomorrow. At the sight of the dolled-up Lady Gyokyo, her ladies gush at her beauty. It is said that crimson suits her better than anyone else in the land. Gyokyo presents them all jewelry to represent them as her ladies, and then they hold Mao Mao to prep her for the event. And after wiping her face, Mao Mao sighs because they caught her. The 4 high concubines, Gyokyo, the precious consort, Li Hua, the wise consort, Li Shu, the virtuous consort, and Ah Duo, the pure consort, enter the garden area. Jin Shi comes to greet Gyokyo's group, mostly to check on Mao Mao, and upon seeing her face, he's stun-locked, not recognizing her at first with her beauty. He asks if she's wearing makeup because her freckles are gone, but actually, she isn't. She simply removed them. The freckles were actually makeup. That's why they're gone. With Jin Shi confused, She explains that every day she puts dried clay on her face to add freckles, so she'd technically been wearing makeup the entire time. This only left him more confused. Why would she do such a thing? Well, it's to prevent being dragged into a back alley, and hearing her horrible upbringing leaves Jinshi shocked. Even though Mao Mao lived near the brothels, not every man left sexually satisfied. Some had empty wallets, violent tendencies, and venereal diseases. She knew a short, skinny, ugly girl rarely would be a target. And even though she never got dragged into a back alley, she still got kidnapped. Hearing her story made Jinshi feel regretful, apologizing for not being able to police those men. To Mao Mao, it's whatever though. A buyer can't tell if one was kidnapped or just sold off legally. It still makes Mao Mao mad, but it's not Jinshi's fault things ended up this way. He apologized to her again, getting close and leaving a hairpin in her hair, with his face blushed. Mao Mao examined it, not quite sure why he gave her this hairpin, and all the ladies in waiting came by to congratulate her. But before Mao Mao could get an explanation on what this pin meant, the sounds of drum beating meant the event was starting, with the high concubines sitting in their appropriate positions, and the emperor watching from the center. Gyokuyo's ladies in waiting huddled together to deal with the cold winds at the event. And watching the event, Mao Mao feels like the arrangement is made to instill rivalry between the four concubines. Amongst them, holding Princess Ling Li, is the Empress Dowager, An Shi, the current emperor's mother. With her youthful looks, Mao Mao is disturbed to hear she gave birth to the emperor at 11 years old. We learn An Shi has 2 children, the emperor and his younger brother, who was rumored to be too sickly to leave the house. Behind Mao Mao and Gui Yan, Yinghua is upset hearing Li Hua's ladies calling them ugly, and especially hiring that ugly girl Mao Mao, which leaves Mao Mao surprised that they can't recognize she's right in front of them, especially with Mao Mao having scared the one insulting them, saying she'd perform all sorts of dangerous experiments on her body. Mao Mao then gave the girl a vicious expression, reminding her of who she is, frightening the girl and making her drag her friend away. Looking at Mao Mao, Gyokuyo's ladies always felt sympathetic. Growing in poverty, she ruined her face daily because of her distrust in men. 2 months of bullying at the Crystal Pavilion, and despite all this, Mao Mao is always thinking about taking care of them. They conclude this is why Lord Jinshi looks after her. But Mao Mao thinks they're totally delusional. Adua's ladies in purple begin scolding Li Shu's ladies for dressing Li Shu in crimson. The 2 groups have always been at odds, with Li Shu being the youngest at 14 and Adua being 35. Even more awkward, we learn they used to be daughter and mother-in-law. It's a little complicated, but one was the previous emperor's concubine and another the current emperor's. With the emperor passing and this concubine still pure, she eventually became the current emperor's. Mao Mao ponders this until she hears that it was actually Li Shu, who was 5 years ago at the age of 9, actually the mother-in-law, not Adua, who was 30 at the time. As Li Shu passes by Mao Mao, Mao Mao remarks a white dress would suit her better, and the crimson obviously clashes with Lady Gyokuyo. Elsewhere in the event, as Mao Mao is walking, she stumbles upon a man named Li Haku, who offers her a hairpin. It looks like he's handing them out to everyone, so no servant feels left out. Thus, she takes one before he brightly takes off, making her think he's like a dog. Looking at the pin, Lady Li Hua arrives, believing Mao Mao should have more, presenting Mao Mao with her own personal pin before taking off. However, what is she to do with all these pins? Later, the food tasting for the high concubines begins. Mao Mao handles things just fine, but the taste tester next to her is certainly freaking out. The life of a taste tester is expendable. Only Mao Mao could be a freak that enjoys eating poison, now wishing for some pufferfish because she found the stinging sensation on the tongue to be wonderful. The next dish is vinegar fish and vegetables, a favorite of the emperor's. It usually includes blueback, but for some reason, it's jellyfish. The emperor's cook would never make a mistake like this, so Mao Mao concluded that the server messed up. However, watching Lady Li Shu freak out over the fish, Mao Mao wonders if Li Shu doesn't like it, but she can't refuse to eat it in front of the emperor. Then looking over, Mao Mao watches Lady Li Shu's taste tester give a wicked smirk, wishing she hadn't seen it. Upon tasting the next dish, Li Haku is astonished from far away, seeing Mao Mao elated. She licks her lips, making him wonder just how delicious the soup is, only for Mao Mao to determine it was poisoned. Mao Mao begins taking her leave. Jinshi arrives at the scene, hearing the minister try the soup next and collapse. Jinshi finds Mao Mao, who is oddly happy despite swallowing the toxin. He grabs her arm, trying to take her to the infirmary. but she tells him she already coughed it up, even though she would have loved to swallow all of it. Leaving it coursing through her veins while she'd be spazzing on the ground? With a gluttonous beauty, she asks him for the rest of the soup, only for him to call her an idiot. He explains the minister tried the soup after she declared it to be poisoned, just to verify the truth, and he collapsed from it. Mao Mao then pulls out an emetic agent from her dress, which will help the minister throw it all up. Jinshi takes it, but still drags Mao Mao with a more serious attitude that she isn't used to. She prefers him like this somewhat. At the palace infirmary, as Mao Mao pukes, she marvels at the good drugs she received to help. And she's bright again, all empty now. Jinshi wants to learn more about who was trying to poison Lady Gyokyo, so Mao Mao suggests bringing a certain someone. So they meet with Lady Li Shu, and as they exchange greetings, Mao Mao spots her scratching her arm. Mao Mao lifts Li Shu's sleeves to see her covered in rashes. She knew it. Li Shu has an allergy to mackerel. Mao Mao explains that she herself is allergic to buckwheat. She had once tried to build a tolerance for it, but it just made her throat swell and her breathing difficult. Even just a little would cause rashes. Li Shu wondered how she knew, so Mao Mao explained the vinegar dish used a different ingredient from the usual one, meaning Lady Li Shu's dish got swapped with Lady Gyokyo's dish by mistake. Upon hearing this, Li Shu's lady-in-waiting's eyes widened as if she had made a mistake. As Mao Mao explains, this is not about Li Shu being a picky eater, and that feeding her something like this knowingly is the same as poisoning her. This makes the lady-in-waiting sweat in further regret. And as Mao Mao hands her a list of things Li Shu needs to avoid eating, Mao Mao gives one of her most deadly glares. Jinshi concluded the server had truly messed up, with Mao Mao speculating the poison wasn't actually meant for Gyokyo, but instead Li Shu. And with everything concluding, Jinshi continued to ponder if this assassination was somehow related to the colored burning tablets from earlier. A young Mao Mao would always follow after her father. This was just a dream of hers, which left her wondering how her dad was doing. After last night's garden party poisoning, her associate ladies-in-waiting had thrown her into bed, so she finally got a good deal of rest. But sleeping till noon was still too much for her. Showing up to work, Lady Gyokyo noticed Mao Mao's freckles on again, which Mao Mao desired to keep on because she's uncomfortable without them. Gao Shun is here, presenting the soup that Lady Gyokyo was about to drink, so that Mao Mao can examine it. Mao Mao then prepares cotton, powder, and a brush. She uses a technique with them to reveal fingerprints, the fingerprints from people who touched the bowl after it was wiped clean. She deduces the bowl having been held by 4 people. First, 3 people touched the side of the bowl, one who poured the soup, one who carried it, and Lady Li Shu's taster. Then, one more, an outsider that touched the rim of the bowl. That outsider is the one who most likely poisoned the food. But Gao Shun questions why Li Shu's taster fingerprints are also there. Mao Mao answers that the taster was most likely harassing Lady Li Shu, not knowing it was poisoned. Gao Shun is surprised to hear a lady-in-waiting bullying a high-ranking concubine. However, Mao Mao opens with, "This is all just conjecture," reminding Gao Shun of Li Shu's dress color, remarking it as odd that knowing what Gyokyo's dress color was going to be, they hadn't recommended a different one. And also, Li Shu's ladies-in-waiting weren't even matching her outfit like all the other concubine ladies. This made Li Shu appear like an idiot who can't read the room. She then remembered Dua's ladies scolding Li Shu's for not doing their jobs. The palace is full of enemies, and the only people a concubine can truly trust is her ladies. Mao Mao suspected Li Shu's to have recommended the bad dress color, and she'd worn it without realizing they'd done it to humiliate her. And even the food swapping that occurred, albeit the taster didn't know it was poisoned. But still, Mao Mao found their whole relationships to be distasteful. The motivation to harass Li Shu most likely being that she's wed to the current emperor when she was wed before to the previous one. Culturally, they're taught a wife must sacrifice everything to devote to her husband, and the act of marrying a deceased husband's son is an indecency beyond words. Understanding the motivations behind Li Shu's bad relationship with her ladies, Gao Shun only has one more question. Why did Mao Mao try to cover for Li Shu's taster the other day? And just hearing this gets Mao Mao in offensive cat mode. She felt empathy, knowing the life of a servant girl is worthless compared to a concubine, especially the life of a food taster. During lunch the next day, after hearing Mao Mao got some hairpins, Xiao Lan casually mentions Mao Mao can get out of the rear palace now, making Mao Mao freak out, wanting to learn more details. Normally, they are unable to meet men from the outside at the rear palace, but with special permission, a man can escort a female worker outside. With the gifted hairpins, a woman can ask someone to take them out of the palace. Li Haku gets noticed that someone had taken his consolation pin seriously, remembering the only one he gave a pin to that served the Jade Pavilion to be that girl. He wonders how he can turn her down. Mao Mao meets with him, and he immediately asks who she is. After learning she wanted to visit home, Li Haku gets pretty serious, hearing the audacity of a mere lady-in-waiting asking a military officer to vouch for her to leave. He scolds her for trying to exploit him, but no, she does have something to offer him in return. Introductions to the verdigris house with the 3 princess courtesans, or even a single night with one of them would cost most men their yearly salary. Pairin, Joka, Mei, he can take his pick with these introduction tablets. However, Li Haku is in disbelief as not even the highest ranking officials can afford one of them. But if he refuses, she has other options she can choose from, showing her 2 hairpins, one with rose quartz and one with silver. Li Haku realizes those are from people who obviously outrank him. Pulling her bargaining chips, Li Haku folds to her gambit. Sometime later, Jinshi finished all the paperwork he was buried in. So now with the time to visit Mao Mao, he found out she had already left. He was broken after hearing Gyokuyo tell him she's already left with someone else. Teasing him gave her a chuckle. However, she explained it was just a 3-day homecoming, nothing else. The pleasure district where Mao Mao grew up is actually walking distance from the rear palace, just beyond the walls and moats. They arrive at the verdigris house, and when Mao Mao goes to greet the madam, she gets an uppercut to the gut, knocking her over. The madam comes over, having heard about Li Haku already, a rising military star with a handsome face and a good build. He tells a girl to get Pairin, the eldest princess, to serve some tea for him. Afterwards, we learn the madam is covering for Mao Mao, having learned she was kidnapped over 10 months ago, but wants her to bring more young men like Li Haku so they can drain their bank accounts over a long period of time. Soon after, Mao Mao finally returns home to meet her father, who casually welcomes her home. As he continues to work, she shares all of her experiences in the rear palace and everything she'd gone through for hours on end. And by the end, as the father watches her rest, he thinks of her ending up at the rear palace to be a twist of fate. The day begins with Mao Mao just getting out of bed. A little girl from a brothel knocks on her house door and drags Mao Mao back to a brothel house to see a man and a woman passed out. She hits herself to focus up, and she and one of the courtesans perform CPR on the 2. And afterwards, Mao Mao successfully saves them. Post-success, she analyzes the situation. The 2 who had collapsed were a courtesan and her customer, the room filled with the scent of alcohol and tobacco. She notices wheat, a pipe, and some tobacco leaves. The girl from earlier who brought Mao Mao over brings Mao Mao some charcoal she had requested, and when Mao Mao tells the girl to bring her father later, as the girl leaves, she has a devious look on her face. Mao Mao's father enters the scene, and while examining the room, he remarks Mao Mao's medical work to be not bad. He teaches her, as he's still much further ahead in terms of medical knowledge, and she still has a lot to learn. As they're enjoying snacks as well as payment from the brothel's proprietor, Mao Mao speculates the event being a double self-end, where the man can afford to buy out the courtesan, and instead the 2 lovers chose to end their lives together. But he seemed quite handsome and wore expensive clothing, not really the type to be short on money or women. Mao Mao then noticed the little girl from earlier walk by, heading towards the room where the man was staying. She followed. Seeing the little girl about to end his life, Mao Mao pulls the blade away. However, the little girl tells Mao Mao this man deserves to die. The little girl desperately reaches to take the knife back, but Mao Mao headbutts her, leaving the little girl in tears. Then, one of the courtesans enters, and upon seeing what had transpired, asks to speak to Mao Mao about this. The courtesan explains that the man was always a problem customer. He'd sweet-talk a courtesan and insinuate on buying her out, but when he got tired of one, he'd dump her and move on. He was widely hated. Some woman tried to stab him even, poisoned in the past by another courtesan. However, his rich merchant father pampers him, settling everything with money. This little girl's older sister got dumped by him too. On the day of her buyout, he suddenly cancelled, even though she loved him. The courtesan who drank the poison today was close with the older sister as well. They pleaded with Mao Mao to keep this all a secret. Back at home, Mao Mao still pondered the whole event, thinking it doesn't make sense for the man to have committed a double self-end, with Mao Mao's father reminding her not to make conclusions based on conjecture, as it's clear he's already figured out what happened. Thinking of all the events, she realizes it was definitely a murder attempt by the courtesan, and not a double self-end. The courtesan used drinks laced with tobacco poison, and even though the man was on guard from previous poisoning attempts, she convinced him to drink it by drinking some herself, with a special trick: 2 cups, 1 drink. Different drinks have different densities. Pouring a lighter drink slowly over a heavier drink, one can create a pretty looking layered drink. The courtesan then used a wheat stalk to drink just the lower layer, without raising suspicion, but the top layer contained the poison, from which the man drank and passed out from. Afterward, she drank from the top as well, but just a little, not enough to kill her. The beautiful courtesan, who seemed quite fragile, was actually quite clever. And Mao Mao wondered if all the girls in the brothel were in on it, because she shouldn't conclude based on conjecture. Mao Mao really missed this pleasure district. In essence, it's no different from the rear palace, both being a garden and a cage. The stale, trapped air poisons everyone. The courtesans eat the poison around them to become a sweet poison themselves. Mao Mao then went to take a refreshing bath at the verdigris house. One of the 3 princesses, Mei Mei, enters, and while the two bathe together, she expresses how much Pairin, Joka, and the madam missed her. Even though Mao Mao couldn't tell, the madam was acting normal so she would feel welcome. Mei Mei suggests Mao Mao visit the annex before she leaves, and when she does, it's a dark, depressing sight. Before she knew it, Mao Mao's 3-day homecoming had come to an end. She met back with Li Haku, who was totally caught up by Pairin, but now Mao Mao has to come back with new customers every time. Coming back, Mao Mao wonders why Jinshi has such an intense stare. She tries to leave to go change, but Jinshi stops her, telling Mao Mao he'll be waiting for her at the parlor. They meet later, and he seems really upset for some reason. He asks her about her time home, but more importantly, how was Li Haku? Mao Mao wonders how he knows who that is, but she answers he was simply her guarantor. Jinshi became depressed, though, that his pin lost out to a consolation one. Ooh, he was totally jealous. She apologized for not using his hairpin, but she couldn't think of a repayment that he would enjoy. Jinshi became concerned. What kind of repayment? Mao Mao explains she granted Li Haku a night of blissful dreams, which made him very happy. And hearing this, Jinshi became shaken, and he dropped his cup, completely stun-locked. After Mao Mao cleaned him up, she came out to Lady Gyokyo cracking up in laughter, and Hong Yen scolds her with a smack for breaking Jinshi's heart over this misunderstanding. On another day, Gao Shun wonders how long Jinshi is gonna sulk. He's not used to Jinshi responding so childishly. He remembers it took considerable effort to get Lady Gyokyo to stop laughing and explain everything, clearing up that Li Haku received payment from Mao Mao by having him meet a star courtesan. That being said, Jinshi had put a lot of effort to clear his work, only to hear Mao Mao had suddenly left with another man. It had to have been shocking. Later that night, a man barged into Jinshi's office asking for help. And the next day, Jinshi met with Mao Mao, as he had learned a bureaucrat he was acquainted with died while drinking the night before. He wanted to know if Mao Mao really thought alcohol had killed him. Elsewhere, Mao Mao explains that anyone who likes alcohol should know that it is poison in essence. Drinking constantly can sicken the organs. Drinking too much in one sitting can lead to death. Jinshi then explains that Conan died at a party for a group of co-workers, and heard he had a lot to drink, but he was well known for being able to really handle a lot. Conan was a dynamic warrior who drank entire jars of alcohol, and had a well-liked personality. Jinshi then had Mao Mao test the alcohol from the event. No poison in it, but it certainly was a sweet drink that had salt added to it. Conan had a serious sweet tooth, never laying a finger on even the finest smoked meats and rock salts. Even though he used to like spicy food, one day he developed a sweet tooth. With this bit of information, Mao Mao also learned there were rock salts, mooncakes, and dried meat at the party. She then asked him to retrieve the jar Master Conan was drinking from. After reading a report and examining the broken jar, she found there was salt on the inside. Strange how Conan had developed a sweet tooth. When the jar contained so much salt, it left crystals behind when it dried. Salt is essential to the human body, but too much can be poisonous. So given the amount he drank with salt included, Mao Mao closed the case with salt poisoning being the reason. She then hands Jinshi the report, saying Conan had lost the ability to taste salt and thus couldn't tell he was drinking it. Mao Mao had learned that many years ago he had lost his wife and child to an epidemic, and from that day on, he worked all day every day. There is an illness where one loses sense of taste, caused by an unbalanced diet or stress. Mao Mao had no clue who would have put excessive salt in Conan's drink, but they could have done it just to prank him, not necessarily with malicious intent. However, Jinshi still mourned the man's passing. Conan had helped him a lot when he was younger, but with the night coming to a close, not everything was peaceful, as a woman sunk to the bottom of the moat. The next day, Mao Mao examines the woman, learning she was a servant from the rear palace. Physician Guan is usually supposed to handle stuff like this, but he's a little baby. However, Mao Mao can't do this alone, as she's not allowed to touch corpses. Jinshi finds it surprising, even though Mao Mao is used to the sight of them, since the pleasure district itself is only one step away from lawless chaos. However, she made a promise to her father to never touch corpses, because humans can become medicinal ingredients too. Given her curiosity, it wouldn't be long before she starts to dig up graves, so she must never cross that line. The court physician freaks out having to give an autopsy, but just from looking, Mao Mao can see she's tall, wore hard wooden shoes, had bandages on one foot, fingers all red. It must have been cold in that water. Jinshi explains the woman was in fact a servant who worked normally the other day. The guard believes she climbed the wall last night and threw herself in the moat. Mao Mao can't tell if it was a self-end, but is sure she had to be assisted by someone. After all, there are no ladders on the wall and no climbing tools, with the walls being at least 4 times Mao Mao's height. But there is a place where concubine Fuyu had climbed up to dance on walls under the moon previously. Still though, it would have been difficult for the servant who died to have climbed up, given her bound feet. Foot binding is a custom where small feet are considered beautiful. It's not done to all women, but they do have a distinct walking style when you see them. Mao Mao is still unsure whether or not it was a self-end or murder, but she believes the woman was still alive when she had fallen in. She must have clawed at the walls to try to climb out, as her fingers were bloodied and red. Self-end or murder? Mao Mao would never take her own life. She'd hate to be killed by someone else too, because if she died, she wouldn't be able to test any more drugs or poisons. Jinshi walked over to her, wondering what she was lost in thought about. Mao Mao replied, she wondered what kind of poison she would use to die. She's not trying to die, but nobody knows when it'll happen. Even if it's not something they wished for, a malicious third party can cause an undesired death, like Master Conan. Mao Mao reflects on all the horrifying events that had transpired. With a moment of silence between her and Jinshi, she then asks him to make sure, if he's ever tasked with executing her, that he makes sure it's with poison. He freaks out, wondering where that's coming from, but logically, if Mao Mao were ever to make a mistake, he would probably be the one to be given the order. Despite now realizing she might be stepping on Jinshi's heart a bit, she apologizes but still acknowledges she's a commoner. Her life could be taken away over the slightest mistake. Jinshi tells her he'd never do such a thing, only for her to respond, it's not a would or would not type of issue. It's a can or cannot, making his face grow solemn, acknowledging the truth in her words. Mao Mao later learned the dead servant was at the garden party where the poisoning took place. They found a will with some relevant content, and closed the case as a self-end. On another day, Gao Shun reports finally finding the one with the burn marks on their arms from the colored fire. It's Fa Ming from the garden pavilion, head lady in waiting under concubine Ah Duo. It's lunchtime and Xiaolan discusses the rumor of the woman who had self-ended by jumping in the moat. Hearing it was the woman who poisoned Lady Li Shu's food at the garden party, the woman apparently served concubine Ah Duo, who is apparently going to lose her title and be replaced by a younger concubine soon. Lady Ah Duo is 1 year older than the emperor at 35. She had a male baby with him once, but lost him. Mao Mao wondered if Li Hua would be replaced if she couldn't have another baby. There's also no guarantee that Lady Gyokyo will continue to have the emperor's love. Even the most beautiful flowers will wilt over time. The flowers of the rear palace are meaningless unless they bear fruit. Later, Mao Mao attends a tea party at the Jade Pavilion with guest Lady Li Shu, with Li Shu's taster a little distraught seeing Mao Mao, but it's not like Mao Mao would bite her head off. The tea pouring begins, with a bit of honey. However, Li Shu seems freaked out, with her ladies speaking in hushed whispers about her being a picky eater again. Mao Mao breathes a sigh at the sight of Li Shu's stupid ladies, and signals to Gyokuyo the tea isn't a good idea. Gyokuyo orders the tea to be switched out with hot ginger water, and with the scoffing expressions from Li Shu's ladies, Mao Mao gets even more annoyed. Outside the living room, Mao Mao sees Jinxi's arrival. Looks like he was the one who arranged the tea party. She tries to leave, but of course he has to stop her for something. He wants her to start working at the Garnet Pavilion tomorrow to find out more information on the woman who tried to poison Lady Li Shu. Mansions are painted in their master's colors. Figuratively speaking, concubine Gyokuyo's Jade Pavilion feels homey, Li Hua's Crystal Pavilion felt refined and noble, while the Garnet Pavilion, home to Ardua, was practical and simple, yet polished and classy. Ardua, the pure, enters, with Mao Mao detailing her as neither showy nor voluptuous. She has an androgynous, almost gallant kind of beauty. If dressed differently, she'd pass as a young civil servant. She might even look better in a riding suit, instead of her skirt and dress. But why does she remind Mao Mao of someone? They're shown around the place by Fa Ming, as their task is to help clean the place. Mao Mao notices the servants at the Garnet Pavilion to be hard workers, something the idiots from the Crystal Pavilion could learn from. Spending time with Fa Ming, Mao Mao finds her to be friendly, observant, and praising of others. In her guest sleeping quarters, Mao Mao swells the sweetness of the candle before laying in bed for the night. The next day as she works, she wonders if the mastermind behind the poisoning was really here. All the servants here are hard-working, even head lady-in-waiting Fa Ming. With her being well past her prime though and having good qualities for a wife, Mao Mao wondered why she never married. Was it to dedicate herself to concubine Ardua? Strong loyalty is a possible motive for poisoning. With a new concubine coming to enter, Ardua's position is most at risk. But what if a vacancy opened elsewhere first? This emperor is only interested in ripened fruit, so he doesn't visit Lady Li Shu. That's fine, given her age of 14, but one could also claim she's not serving her role as concubine. If someone were to poison someone for Ardua, targeting Li Shu isn't out of the question. Mao Mao then gets called to help another servant, and in this room are jars full of honey, delivered by Fa Ming's family, as they own an apiary, a place where bees are kept. No wonder there was so much honey here despite it being so expensive. Meaning the sweet smell from the candle last night was honey. Mao Mao then notices Li Shu wandering by the Garnet Pavilion. But why only with her taster? Later, Mao Mao gives her report to Jinxi, saying the prime suspect is Fa Ming, given she has bandages wrapped around her arms. The colored text plates that were burned in the garbage fire were wrapped in a woman's dress with burns on the sleeves. But she doesn't feel the gentle Fa Ming could be part of a conspiracy. Jinxi does some flirty harassing with some honey, and something clicks in Mao Mao's mind, putting all the pieces together. There's something about the honey. Gyokuyo arrives, not so happy to see Jinxi's attempts to stick honey in Mao Mao's mouth, but he runs away. Mao Mao then heads with Gao Shun to Li Shu's pavilion. She tries to ascertain why Li Shu doesn't like honey, but she doesn't have a particular allergen to it. She just remembers there was a life-threatening event when she was a baby that involved it, and her nurses told her not to eat it. Then, when Mao Mao mentions Fa Ming's name, Li Shu gives a distraught look. Afterwards, Mao Mao wants to know if there's a place she can learn about past events from the rear palace. So Gao Shun gets her some records from the palace library. She learns 17 years ago, when the current emperor was still a prince, he had a son with concubine Ardua. The baby is gone now, but was born around the same time as the prior emperor's son, the current emperor's little brother. Ardua used to be the current emperor's only concubine, and she was apparently his foster sibling. Their baby had been delivered by Dr. Lo Men, which shocked Mao Mao, but she always had a hunch. With several of the herbs growing in the rear palace being the same ones she used growing up, someone must have transplanted them there. A man who drags his feet like an old woman. A doctor overqualified for the position of a pleasure district apothecary. A former eunuch with a bone removed from one knee. Why was her father expelled from the palace? The next day, Mao Mao presents something to Fa Ming, something they need to talk about. Fa Ming begins to chop bread, served with honey. Pleasantries normal for a guest to the pavilion. However, Fa Ming's smile seems uncanny. Mao Mao asks where they're moving to, because with everything packed, it's pretty clear now that Ah Duo is being replaced because she's infertile. Mao Mao asks for details about what happened during the birth of Ah Duo's child. And when Mao Mao explains her father was the doctor, Fa Ming jolts up in astonishment. Mao Mao deduced that with Ah Duo's baby being born at the same time as the Empress Dowager's, the imperial doctor had given priority to the Empress, taking too long to make it to Ah Duo. She lost her uterus and lost her baby soon after. Fa Ming stares completely distraught because Mao Mao has figured it all out, despite her father being a quack as claimed by Fa Ming. Fa Ming looks at Mao Mao coldly with the eyes of a killer, as Mao Mao presents the cause of Ah Duo's death: a flower and some honey. Many flowers have poison in them, like aconite or azalea. Their nectar can be poisonous too. Fa Ming knows that now, but back then she didn't. She didn't realize regular honey with no poison, what she believed was good for health, could have been harmful to a newborn baby. With Ah Duo still recovering, she trusted her head lady-in-waiting, but that very trust was what caused the baby's death. The cause was then treated as a mystery, and with Mao Mao's father blamed for the mistakes, he was expelled. But later, Fa Ming learned the actual cause of the baby's death. Someone taught her that honey can be poisonous to babies. She had to make sure Ah Duo never found that out. That's why she tried to eliminate Lady Li Shu. During the emperor's previous reign, Li Shu was close to Ah Duo. They were both fond of each other. A young girl taken from her parents, a woman who could no longer give birth. There may have been a type of codependency that developed. During that time, Fa Ming learned from Li Shu that she almost died eating honey as a baby, and to stop Ah Duo from ever hearing that story, she chased Li Shu away from the Garnet Pavilion and tried to poison Li Shu to her end. Fa Ming asks what Mao Mao wants to keep quiet. With a murderous look on her face, she tells Mao Mao she'll give her anything, but Mao Mao tells her it's meaningless. Fa Ming walked to the window, speaking of everything she admired about Ah Duo, and now deeply basks in the pain of causing the person she respected the most to lose her child. Back then, Ah Duo even told her ladies not to blame themselves. With a look of dread on her face, Ah Duo told them she knew a baby could die from even the slightest illness. She took her losses gracefully, but Fa Ming knew her lady cried herself to sleep every night, and reflecting on it shook Fa Ming to her core. Mao Mao knows no matter what, once she reports this to Jin Shi, Fa Ming will receive capital punishment. So, Mao Mao offers her a solution. At night, Mao Mao returns to her quarters, completely worn out, having worn layers of stiffened oil paper, just in case an altercation would have happened. Reporting back to Jin Shi, he got a report that Fa Ming turned herself in as Li Shu's poisoner. Jin Shi asks if Mao Mao knows anything about this, but she denies it. In the report, Fa Ming's motive was listed as only wanting to keep Lady Ah Duo in as a main concubine. However, Ah Duo's relocation to a detached palace in the south was already decided a long time ago, before any of this. As Mao Mao works, she reflects on letting Fa Ming choose her own destiny. She let her self-report in a way that prevented Ah Duo from ever finding out that she was the cause of the baby's death, even if Fa Ming were to die for it. Later that night, Mao Mao climbs up the castle wall to look at the sky, reflecting on Fa Ming's execution. Ah Duo appears before her, and she's set to depart the rear palace tomorrow. The two enjoy some drinks together, and Ah Duo explains that when her son left, she returned to being the emperor's friend, not his concubine. She was given the title only in pity, wondering why she held onto it for so long. She then poured the alcohol over the moat where her servant jumped to self-end, to mourn her death. With Mao Mao climbing down the wall, a man's voice hollers at her, wondering what she's doing up there. Oh, it's Jin Shi. Well, this is awkward, so Mao Mao tries to leave, but he grabs onto her. She looks back at him, seeing tears dropping down his eyes. He pleads with her to keep him warm, just a little longer. The next day, Ah Duo returns her crown of pure concubine to Jin Shi, the very crown that will be bestowed to the next high concubine chosen. Looking at Ah Duo and Jin Shi together, Mao Mao knew Ah Duo resembled someone, and they might as well swap outfits. Wait, last night, Ah Duo mentioned something about her son leaving her. Why didn't she say it died? It could almost be interpreted that her son is still alive. What if Abdul's and the dowager's sons were swapped? What if, despite the medical need for Abdul's delivery, Mao Mao's father was dragged away to tend to the Empress's baby? With Abdul knowing her baby would never been given priority, she allowed her son to be swapped with the Empress's to give him a chance to live a better life. What if people found out the babies were swapped later? If that was after the one baby had died, it would explain why Mao Mao's dad was physically punished for not noticing. This would explain why the emperor's younger brother is in a delicate position, and why concubine Abdul, who's supposed to be a realist, stayed in the rear palace for so long. Mao Mao sighed at the ridiculousness of this speculation. There's no way that could be true. Later, inside Jin Shi's office, he reads a list of Fa Ming's family and those connected to them. But why is Mao Mao listed amongst them? After Fa Ming's death, her family's assets were confiscated, and all underwent varying degrees of corporal punishment. Fa Ming was determined to be the sole perpetrator in Li Shu's assassination attempt, so Abdul suffered no blame. The list Jin Shi received also included people who did business with Fa Ming's family. The kidnappers who sold off Mao Mao were included in this list, hence why Mao Mao's name is here. But with Fa Ming's punishment, Jin Shi fights with keeping Mao Mao's ties concealed. He doesn't want to lose Mao Mao, even knowing she'd follow any order a higher-up would give her, even death. Having lunch with Xiaolan, Mao Mao learns that the daughters of any family that had done business with Fa Ming's are being fired from the palace. Mao Mao thinks it's bad timing, knowing if she's let go and sent back home, the madam will probably put her into concubine work for not bringing back any more men. She ran desperately to find Jin Shi. Knowing about the layoffs, she asks what's going to happen to her. Jin Shi shows her the list of those associated with Fa Ming's family business, the page specifically with Mao Mao's name on it. And he asks her what she wants to do. She thinks as Lady Gyokuyo's lady-in-waiting, she can test for poisons and hang out in the medical office. She's been enjoying her current life, but being just a servant, she knows she's in no position to request to stay. She answers Jin Shi, telling him she'll do as he orders. Manual labor, cooking, or tasting. She's almost pleading to stay. Jin Shi gets up, telling her he understands. But Mao Mao is disappointed to hear she's being compensated and let go. Later, he's completely depressed, sitting in a corner. After a week of being fired, Mao Mao returned home to the pleasure district. But Gyokuyo wasn't happy about this. Gao Shun thinks back, remembering it's always been challenging to find Jin Shi a new toy to replace his favorite one, even from when he was little. No, Mao Mao wasn't the same thing. Maybe Jin Shi had let her go because he didn't want to treat her like a tool. Back at the Verdigris house, Mao Mao was getting dolled up by the three princesses. Her workplace tonight is a noble's party outside the brothel. Calling a courtesan to one's own mansion costs quite a sum. Calling one of the princesses is equivalent to what most make in a year, but calling all three at once? There must be no limits to how rich a rich person could be. Mao Mao is simply going to make the princesses look better in comparison. Luckily, she was paid more than expected when leaving the rear palace, so she was able to avoid getting sold off into courtesan work, at least for now. As they head out in carriage, Mao Mao reflects on how the madam really wanted her to become a courtesan, but she can't recite poetry or play the erhu, and she absolutely cannot dance. She's just an apothecary's daughter with no interest outside of medicine. As they walk through the mansion, Mao Mao notices every piece of furniture to be unimaginably expensive. They arrive at the entertainment room. Supposedly, Li Haku was the one who arranged the introduction with these high-ranking nobles. The courtesans then displayed their impressive skills in song and dance. Mao Mao didn't mind the work, but smiling was getting exhausting. She found a familiar man in the back. Wondering if he was bored, she decided to sit by him. However, he just muttered the words, "Leave me alone." Noticing who it is, she utters his name, and he's surprised to see her, telling her that makeup changes her look considerably. He's shocked to learn she's working part-time as a courtesan, and sweating profusely upon hearing she hasn't taken any customers yet. He asks what if he bought her out, which she doesn't believe to be a bad idea. She wouldn't mind working at the rear palace again. Jin Shi sighs. He thought she quit because she hated it there, but he misunderstood. She was trying to convince him to let her stay. Despite there having been a lot of trouble, she loved performing as a taster. The only thing she missed were her poison experiments. Jin Shi laughed, warmly telling her she should probably stop playing with poison, but accepts that's who she is. A woman he endears, who doesn't express her feelings clearly. He tries to touch her face, but she pulls away, telling him rules are rules. He continually asks with persistence, so she sighs, allowing only just his fingers. He then wipes off some of her lipstick and gives it a kiss, leaving Mao Mao wide-eyed as he smiles with her lipstick on his lips. She blushes, looking away in embarrassment, and the three princesses laugh joyously looking at them, with Gao Shun even giving approval. Afterwards, the princesses playfully prodded Mao Mao, asking who the charming man was to her. As Mao Mao spent her days working at the verdigris house, mostly doing her regular apothecary work, she wondered how everyone was doing back at the rear palace. In a bath with the madam asked Mao Mao if she was going back to the rear palace, but Mao Mao wasn't sure. One night, she finds herself unable to sleep and steps outside to get some air. As she sits in the cold, it begins to snow, and she began reminiscing on her times at the rear palace. Sitting in those memories, she wondered what was going to happen from now on. A few days later, a beautiful noble came to the pleasure district, bringing the madam joy at all the money being offered to buy the courtesan with the apothecary skills. The noble then displayed a strange herb growing from an insect as a gift that brought the courtesan extreme joy. In the evening, Jin Shi sits across from the emperor to drink. He reflects on no matter how hard he tries, he can only slightly outperform a regular person, but instead, he's been granted an appearance more beautiful than anyone. With the things he truly wants so far out of reach, he used to be dissatisfied, but now has gotten over it, and now uses his superior tools to his advantage. After all, he's just a child floundering on the emperor's palm. That's why he manages the rear palace, or whatever the emperor wishes. That's the only way he can choose his own path. Back at the verdigris house, Mei Mei helps Mao Mao prepare for her leave back to the palace, throwing in tons of makeup Mao Mao doesn't think she needs. The princesses gather around, hoping Mao Mao brings back plenty of rich men to the brothel. At night, as Mao Mao rests next to her father, he pats her head saying they'll both be lonely again at night, but at least she can come home anytime. Mao Mao reflects on how even though she has no mother, she has a caring dad, a nosy granny, and a lively group of big sisters to keep her company. On the day of her leave, as Jinshi waits, Mao Mao walks towards him all dolled up with her entourage, and seeing her makes him blush. In the carriage ride, Mao Mao blames him for all the unwanted attention. He's about to counter by saying she looks beautiful, but he stops, saying, "It's nothing." When they arrive at the palace entrance, even guards gawk at her, making Jinshi a little annoyed. So, Jinshi tells her to go back to her normal freckled form, as he feels the need to block other men from being around her, but she has no idea what he's doing. They arrive at Jinshi's house, Mao Mao's new workplace. With her being fired once, she can't be put back in the same position, so now she'll be working in the outer court, outside of the rear palace. Meeting with Jinshi in the living room, Mao Mao is surprised to hear she won't be doing any servant work, but instead will be preparing for the court lady exam. In the morning, she meets with Jinshi's court attendant, Shui Lian, to help serve breakfast. There, Mao Mao is surprised to learn that there are no other attendants, but understands when Shui Lian explains the young girls would always cause Jinshi trouble, such as leaving underwear made out of their hair in his closet. Ew. Seeing the tired Jinshi waking, Mao Mao thinks he has so much wasted sex appeal. If another woman saw this, she'd lose herself easily. Even guys might pounce on him right away. He truly has a sin-inducing air about him. Mao Mao then wonders if she could sell his scent as an aphrodisiac. As Mao Mao and Gao Shun go about their day, Mao Mao has a new perspective on Jinshi. He's apparently always been a busy guy. Gao Shun showed Mao Mao around the outer court, but there's so many buildings she had a hard time keeping up. Her ability to learn things she isn't interested in is pretty below average. After dropping off some charcoal into Jinshi's office, outside, Mao Mao notices the glares from some ladies. Perhaps they're sizing up the new girl. Mao Mao describes court ladies of the outer court to be like secretaries. They have the right qualifications, background, and education, unlike the hodgepodge of female officials at the rear palace, which would explain the outer court ladies' self-esteems. The girls come up to Mao Mao questioning why someone like her was assigned directly to Master Jinshi. However, Mao Mao can only focus on how well-fed the woman barking at her is. Mao Mao doesn't think it's a good idea for her to stay silent, so she asks them if they're jealous. Whoops, wrong choice of words. Mao Mao then approaches with better tact, telling them she's not getting special treatment. After all, she's ugly. Why would Jinshi go after meatless chicken bones when there are heaps of delicious abalones and boar meat in front of him? Even so, one of the women still questions why he'd hire Mao Mao. so she pulls out her ace in the hole, her wounds on her arm that look especially messed up since she had tried some burn medicine the other day. Mao Mao meekly tells them Lord Jinshi has a heart of gold, giving someone as pauper as herself a way to make a living. The ladies then take their leave. However, Jinshi had secretly been there all along, wondering if Mao Mao gets harassed like this often, but she escapes without answering. The day of the exams came, but Mao Mao failed. This doesn't deter her happiness though, as she still gets excited finding many herbs to pick. However, one of the court ladies comes by to whack her head, telling Mao Mao not to go beyond that point towards the military area, all while an onlooker smiles, having observed them. Another day comes, and with the arrival of the new pure consort that replaces Ato, Mao Mao is being assigned as her teacher for some reason by Lady Gyokyo and Li Hua. Arriving at the assignment, Mao Mao kicks Jinshi out, with the lesson being for ladies only. The room is already seated with the 4 high concubines and their head ladies in waiting, with Mao Mao spotting the new pure consort, Lulan. With her age being 17, the emperor will probably spend more time with her. Mao Mao begins giving her teaching lessons based on all of her experience from the verdigris house. Some laugh in joy at the techniques, some blush in embarrassment, with even Li Shu's soul leaving her body. After the day's lesson, Jinshi is surprised to see Gyokyo and Li Hua pleased, Li Shu wishing she'd never heard any of this, and Lulan unfazed. Later that night, an explosion occurs in the palace, and Mao Mao wakes up to the scurrying of soldiers, but decides to go back to bed because it's cold. The man who observed Mao Mao earlier, Lo Han, investigates, reporting nothing to his associates even though there's a peculiar pipe on the ground. The next day, while getting distracted by herbs per usual, Mao Mao spots Li Haku, who adorns a new colored belt. He must have gotten a promotion. She heard after meeting Pairin, he fell in love with her, and even though he can't afford a night with her on his salary, he has tea in the area at least to see her. After the two chat about Mao Mao's transfer to the outer palace, Li Haku explains he's been brought here to investigate the explosion, since no one has determined the cause. When hearing this, Mao Mao gets curious and starts looking around. She sees shrapnel all over the building. With this being an attempt of arson, it's easy to see why Li Haku was sent to investigate instead of a low-ranking official. Despite this building being a warehouse, Mao Mao thinks of its weight in terms of being a part of the palace to the emperor. The country of Li is overall pretty peaceful. However, there's always someone with issues. The occasional barbarian attack, famine, or drought here and there. Who knows how long peace with neighboring nations will last? There may even be foreign countries who have complaints. Mao Mao then finds the ivory smoking pipe. She's lost in thought, even getting scolded by Li Haku. An explosion, food storage, a pipe. She then runs to a similar storage and gets supplies from Li Haku so she can do an experiment. She makes a box, putting flour in it. She has a flame rope readied, warning Li Haku that standing close is dangerous, but he doesn't listen. She scurries away with the box exploding with flames lingering on Li Haku until they splash water on him. She determines the source of the explosion to be fine buckwheat powder, as it burns easily, and she presents the pipe that likely caused it. If someone had snuck inside the warehouse to take a quick smoke, the outside wind could flow in, blowing the powder into the air. And when lighting, the flour-filled air would catch on fire and explode, so people shouldn't smoke in the warehouse ever again. Mao Mao learned this because she had blown up a room at the verdigris house once. Later that night, Mao Mao realizes she accidentally brought the pipe home with her, but upon speculating, thinks it to be a little too expensive for a warehouseman. Later, Gao Shun brings a report to Mao Mao involving a bureaucrat who was poisoned by eating raw pufferfish. He wants her thoughts on it because 10 years ago, a similar case happened where the chef mentioned not using any pufferfish in his dish. However, in each case, the pufferfish guts were disposed of, where all the poison was contained. So how were each of these men poisoned? She sends Gao Shun to bring her more evidence. Then suddenly, Jinshi appears, asking what's going on, only to jump scare Mao Mao, who was lost in thought. The next day, Gao Shun brings the cook's notes, which contain everything served to their master. Mao Mao finds nothing unusual in the ingredient list, except for seaweed. She decides to get a look at the kitchen, and later is escorted by Basen, who doesn't seem to have a good impression of her for some reason, and also seems somewhat familiar to Mao Mao. As Mao Mao investigates the kitchen, a man comes screaming at them, asking why they're in his kitchen. Basen calms the man, telling him they're here on official business, and we learn the man is the poisoned bureaucrat's younger brother. Mao Mao finds a peculiar jar that contains some of the master's favorite snacks. And after the brother assures Mao Mao it isn't poisoned, she takes her leave. On the carriage ride back, Basen asks why she backed down so easily, but she didn't. She took some of the jar's contents with her. She finds the seaweed especially strange since it isn't in season yet. But even if salted and preserved from last year, it wouldn't last this long. It's not native to their region, perhaps imported from the south. Mao Mao then presents 2 plates of seaweed for Gao Shun, Basen, and Jin Shi to look at. Mao Mao speculates that with a merchant learning this particular seaweed is a favorite of the bureaucrats, to profit from it, he had some locals produce a salted version of it. It's problematic because sometimes poisons can become not poisonous. For example, eels are usually poisonous, but after bleeding them or cooking them out, they become edible. In the case of seaweed, she believes it was soaked in lime water first. What she's brought before them is 1 batch soaked in lime water and 1 without, so she eats the soaked one, causing the guys to panic. But it's okay, because she has an emetic. Oh, guess they're just gonna shove it down her throat and make her vomit. Back at the task at hand, who suggested that the trader bring salted seaweed? If the bureaucrat suggested it be imported, of course it'd be his own fault in a sense. But if he didn't, bringing it from a region that doesn't eat it is obviously taking a big risk. With all that, the culprit turned out to be the bureaucrat's younger brother. Motive? Being the younger son, he wasn't treated well. He wanted his older brother out of the picture. Case closed. How did he learn about the seaweed poisoning? From a guy at a tavern, apparently. In Mao Mao's room, she contemplates all the exciting ways she can use the mushrooms growing on the dead bug she got from Jin Shi. She gets so excited, she bumps into him and gives him a warm welcome home. And upon hearing this, he's so elated he starts banging his head into the doorway. As Jin Shi relaxes with some tea, he complains about the military man who's been keeping him busy lately. A man who comes from a good family, past 40, not married, adopted his nephew as his son, and has him handle his housework. A famous weirdo whose only interests are Go, shogi, and rumors. He constantly files complaints, barges in, and continually extends deadlines on decisions that need to be made. Jin Shi believes this man has it out for him. However, as Mao Mao works, she has a bad hunch about who this man is. Lo Han, the military strategist, appears in Jin Shi's office, bothering him the same way he described. He's somehow connected with the Verdigris house, as he has ties to a courtesan he often played with. He considered buying the particular courtesan, as she had beaten him in shogi. She would sell her skills, but never herself. In fact, she didn't treat guests as customers at all. Even when pouring tea, she had an arrogant look, as if she was being charitable to a lowly peasant. However, many with a curious taste were head over heels for her, including himself, as the chills he felt down his spine to be irresistible, which reminded the guys of Mao Mao. She was too expensive, so Lo Han had used a trick to lower her value. But before finishing his story, he requests Jin Shi to bring his new servant to solve a puzzling will left by one of the palace's metalworkers. With Jin Shi curious, he decides to allow Mao Mao to handle the case. Jin Shi details to Mao Mao about the metalworker who was the palace purveyor that had passed recently. He died without passing his techniques to his son. In the man's will, distribution instructions for his memento, which included the workshop shack for the eldest son, furniture with excellent workmanship for the second son, and a fishbowl for the youngest son. And one final note, saying they should all have a tea party together like old times. Mao Mao wonders if the term tea party has some kind of hidden meaning. However, Jin Shi tells her the sons have no idea what that means either. Mao Mao also thinks the mementos seem unbalanced. Why does the last son only get a fishbowl? Is he so unloved? Mao Mao then gets escorted to the address of the metalworker's sons by Basen again. At the house, they're welcomed by one of the sons who shows them around. They are welcomed into the work shack, where the furniture appears oddly placed. As Mao Mao looks around, the eldest son gets impatient, asking if they can really help in figuring out their father's technique. It's just as Mao Mao and Basen have heard. The eldest was left this shack, the middle child this drawer, and the youngest a fishbowl, with the bowl being more valuable than first assumed, since it's actually made out of glass. The second son then mentions his father left him a key. However, it doesn't fit the keyhole he assumed it was for in the drawer, so the actual key he needs is nowhere to be found. He has no idea why his father would leave it for him. The eldest son was annoyed because he inherited the shack, but he can't move the drawer out, with the two sons envying the youngest because at least he got something he could actually sell. Their mother then enters, telling the boys to stop being rude to the guests. With her her two sons having grown to be cynical and her youngest unable to express himself, she felt her husband was worried about them until the moment he died. With the tea served, the sons assumed their normal table positions. Mao Mao then noticed how the sunlight from the window should have hit the drawer, but how come the drawer has no sun damage? She looks at the window and then checks on the drawer, wondering if there's something stuck inside the keyhole. Ba Sen checks in on her. Oh, that's why he looks familiar. He looks just like Gao Shun. Mao Mao then starts putting all the pieces of evidence together and something clicks. She has the youngest put his fishbowl where it used to be against the window and fills it with water. When lining up the symbol a certain way, it beams directly into the key lock and begins to burn. The key now fits, and inside they find a strange rock, the same kind their father used to collect. It seems the youngest is the only one who truly understood his dead father's intent. He wanted the three of them to work together. However, the older brothers felt they were inadequate compared to the younger, who was very talented at metalwork. With the mystery solved, the three brothers now get along and see Mao Mao and Ba Sen off. Before taking off, however, she tells the youngest to visit an apothecary named Lo Men, her father, at the Verdigris House brothel. If they're ever feeling unwell, they should seek him out. Back in Jinxi's office, Lo Han explains how things turned out quite well for the metalworker's sons. The youngest bloomed to take over the craft work, the eldest handles the bookkeeping, and the second son finds new clients. They're all helping the family from different angles. With the task complete, Jinxi hopes to hear the rest of the story about the Verdigris House courtesans and how to decrease their value. But Lo Han finds an excuse not to talk at all and takes his leave. Later, Jinxi meets with Mao Mao, asking if she can do his makeup. Mao Mao certainly thinks Jinxi doesn't need it, thinking there have been many silly wars in history, and several of them caused by beautiful women. If this man in all his heavenly beauty were to put on makeup, she wonders if he's trying to topple a nation or something. Jinxi remarks that her imagination goes too far sometimes. He's actually looking for something to put on his face to disguise himself. That night, Mao Mao preps several things and gets ready to go all out. The next day, she meets with Jinxi, surprising everyone when getting close to his hand. It was really just to tell him his incense smells too expensive. He needs to pick something else. Working at the brothel, they pick customers on appearance, but also by scent as well. Those with multiple showy scents tend to be rich, but have venereal diseases. Those who smell like livestock don't bathe and are unclean. Most new visitors to the Verdigris house are actually shooed away. Mao Mao then does some techniques to ruin the sheen of Jinxi's hair, and has clothing brought for him that smells a little bad, so it'll take away his expensive incense smell. Having Jinxi undress, she observes his physique. With his usual look being that of a heavenly maiden, she's surprised to see his body to be well balanced and muscular. But it's not good for his disguise, so they put stuff in him to change his overall shape and clothing, and then Mao Mao applies makeup so his face matches his attire better. She then gives him a horrible smelling drink that'll make his lips and throat swell so his voice can change, and then has Jinxi stuff his face with cotton to alter his face's shape, and with that, his transformation is complete. They then dress up Mao Mao as well, and the two ride in a carriage together towards their destination, with Jinxi under the alias of Jinka. Arriving near their destination, the two wander about the town, with their goal being a restaurant just outside the pleasure district, where Jinxi will be meeting an acquaintance, and Ba Sen acting as their secret bodyguard. Along the way, Mao Mao gets Jinxi some skewers, and the two enjoy them in the little alleyway. They continue their walk, and Jinxi wonders why Mao Mao is in such a hurry, like she wants to split as soon as possible. Which is true, she wants Jinxi to get to his destination, so she can go buy some radishes and chicken. He then asks her if life at the palace is so bad. He thinks it is better than life in the pleasure district. She thinks it's fine, but often worries about her adoptive father, who is left by himself, which surprised Jinxi hearing she actually cared about someone other than medicine or poison. Jinxi gets intrigued hearing about the details of Mao Mao's father, who is a eunuch. They arrived at the restaurant, where Mao Mao can see the upstairs area is a brothel. She assumes this is the reason Jinxi had to disguise himself. But if it were to see a courtesan, she feels he could have just gone to the pleasure district. He then asks Mao Mao how one could decrease the value of a courtesan, something he originally wanted to know more about from strategist Lo Han. Mao Mao finds the question unpleasant. She breathes a deep sigh, opening with the idea that there are many ways. At the Verdigris house, girls take most of the important lessons while working as servants, and at that time are separated into those with beautiful appearances and those without. The latter, after debuting, immediately take on customers to sell their bodies. Those with talent, however, are taught tea ceremony and given higher education with which to entertain patrons. Thus, their prices increased. Once high enough, they start to appear only very rarely, and eventually, you reach top-ranking courtesans who cost a year's salary just to have tea with. Some retain their chastity until the day they're bought out. Their value comes from their purity. Losing that would easily halve their value. In addition, a pregnancy would reduce it to nearly nothing. After answering, as Mao Mao takes her leave, Jinshi grabs her arm, stopping her. He asks if she's going to leave without him, but of course, her going in would ruin the work of his disguise. As she leaves, she thinks it's all fine, because she said what she said without expressing too much emotion. Looking back as Jinshi enters the brothel, she wishes him a good night with a slight sadness. The sounds of a baby crying as a woman brings a blade right down towards it. This was a nightmare Mao Mao awakened from. It was a dream from when she was a baby. After breakfast, she gets a task from her father to deliver something to the verdigris house, and immediately gets attacked with a hug from Pyrin. It seems Pyrin is fighting with the madam over offers she's receiving, but with the two distracted, Mao Mao uses this as an opportunity to escape. She enters the annex to deliver, remembering this woman used to hatefully chase her out. But she must not have the energy any longer. The woman's illness worsens by the day, and her memories are in shreds. Mao Mao gives the woman medicine, but knows at this point it won't even provide temporary relief. Even so, giving the woman medicine is the only treatment they could think of. The verdigris house is now a reputable establishment, but a decade or so ago, it used to operate in shame. This courtesan served customers during that era, and was unlucky enough to contract syphilis as a result. When Mao Mao's father came to visit the verdigris house, the illness was in incubation. If he'd known about it then, he might have been able to treat her, but nobody trusted a eunuch who suddenly appeared out of nowhere. The courtesan had to serve customers. There was no other way to live. A few years later, when the rashes started to reappear, the sores spread almost instantly. Since then, this woman has been locked up in this annex, out of sight of the customers, which is quite generous considering courtesans who can't work are usually thrown in a ditch. Mao Mao gets a warning by one of the servant girls that the weirdo with the monocle is here, so she shouldn't go outside for a while. As long as she stays put, he won't come here. A longtime customer of the verdigris house, an old acquaintance. Mao Mao then notices the woman laying out rocks as if she's playing Go, thinking she's a stupid woman. Evening comes and Mei Mei enters to let Mao Mao know the weirdo is gone for now. The two head to the bath together, where Mao Mao questions why Mei Mei hasn't left, given she's just under 30, but is at a normal retirement age for a courtesan. However, she wants to keep working here just a little longer. Mao Mao doesn't know what's going through Mei Mei's mind, and it's not a rabbit hole she wants to delve into. If it's what everyone knows as love, that's an emotion she's sure she left behind in the womb of her mother. Back at home, Jinshi is exhausted as he was surprised that the restaurant he was at was also a brothel, which he wanted no part of. He then brings the drink left by Lo Han to Mao Mao to share with Shui Lian. While sitting with her, Shui Lian can tell Mao Mao's mind is wandering. She had hoped working would get her mind off the sickly courtesan, but it didn't. Shui Lian then has Mao Mao pick up some medicine, and she's excited because the outer palace pharmacy is much better than the rear palaces. She wonders what's inside the medicine cabinets, and would love to rummage through the whole place. Sui Ren then comes, asking what Mao Mao's doing. It seems she herself is here to resupply the medicines at the guardhouse. Observing her, Mao Mao wonders why the woman dislikes her. Later, as Mao Mao works, she contemplates on how mysterious Jinshi is. Not just about his work, but he often takes long baths, burns incense before leaving, and eats vegetarian food. It's like a purification ceremony. Are eunuchs allowed to perform ceremonial rites? It's not out of place for a noble to do that, but if he is such a high rank, why is he a eunuch? Was it a decision of the Empress Dowager? In Jinshi's office, Lo Han enters to continue his discussion with Jinshi from earlier. It seems Lo Han had been trying to convince the madam to give him Mao Mao for the last decade, and he feels as if Jinshi stole her from under his nose. He wants to buy her from Jinshi, but Jinshi isn't looking to sell, which gives Lo Han a laugh, as he mentions there aren't many that could defy someone as high up as Jinshi, meaning he knows Jinshi's true identity. Lo Han claims he's just concerned about his daughter, which strikes a nerve in Jinshi. He knows Lo Han is Mao Mao's father by blood. Jinshi then comes by to Mao Mao later, telling her the weirdo official wants to meet her, the weirdo by the name of Lo Han. The two stand in a minor silence, until Mao Mao gives him the dirtiest look, causing Jinshi to back away. So he assures her he'll find a way to turn Lo Han down, as Mao Mao continues her work. He's never seen her like that before, and he never wants to see that again. Mao Mao gets distracted by herbs again until Sui Rei finds her. Sui Rei begins to pick the weeds, which leads Mao Mao to ask what she's planting, only to become surprised hearing Sui Rei is planting something to resurrect someone. If such a thing exists, Mao Mao wants that more than anything, but it was just a joke. As Sui Rei leaves, she tells Mao Mao she'd just be planning some morning glories, with a sort of eerie and weird air about her as she leaves. In Jinxi's office, Gao Shun tells Jinxi about the medium ceremony this afternoon. However, Jinxi can't get Mao Mao's horrid look off of his mind. It left him distraught and distracted. Elsewhere, the Haku comes to Mao Mao telling her there's trouble. The same day that one warehouse had blown up, thieves had broken into a different one. What was stolen were some ceremonial tools, and no one knows the value of them either, as even the man with the most current knowledge on that warehouse had gotten sick from seaweed poisoning, the case Mao Mao solved more recently. The previous manager passed away last year. He had a sweet tooth. Oh, it was Master Conan. It's strange that two people connected to this warehouse died in incidents framed as accidents. Were the deaths in pursuit of some goal? The Haku then pulls out the expensive pipe he had gotten from Mao Mao. He tried to give it back to its owner, but they declined. The owner had apparently received it from some court lady, but why would they randomly give it to some warehouse guard? Apparently, the guard escorted the court lady outside the castle because she was walking alone in the dark, and she had given him the pipe as a token of gratitude. Mao Mao deduces that giving someone such an expensive item might compel them to use it right away, starting a fire to divert the guard's attention and break into another warehouse. This compels Mao Mao to ask about the court lady, but apparently she was wearing a scarf that hid her face. But she was described to be a tall woman that smelled like medicine. This made Mao Mao suspect Sui Rei, but she needed more evidence first. Mao Mao tries to convey that several coincidences could point to someone being the center of it all, which makes the Haku praise her for her intellect. However, Jinxi had been watching them, and feeling a little lonely. Seeing the High Lord, the Haku decided to flee. In Jinxi's office, after hearing the details, Mao Mao still explains she has no suspects, but feels like several traps were set in the hopes that some of them would work out. Jinxi is surprised Mao Mao isn't excited or curious about this case, like she usually would be, so he tells her about an interesting item in stock from a local trader, Ox Bezor, which makes Mao Mao light up just thinking of the medicinal gallstone only found in 1 in 1,000 cows, which makes her so excited she's practically panting on his desk. And she agrees to work hard with the Ox Bezor as her prize. During her investigation, Mao Mao finds out the officer who got food poisoning was from the Board of Rites. He and Master Conan were both related to ceremonies. If the incident with the pipe was to steal ceremonial tools, then these events, disguised as coincidences, must line up to form an intentional incident somewhere. There must be a ceremony that's important somewhere, medium or higher. Mao Mao needed to find out where these ceremonies took place. She gets a scroll with an image of a ceremonial building that's west of the outer court, called the Altar of the Sapphire Sky. The worker in the library then details how he used to work in that building, and was worried it would fall apart back in the day, as the pillar hanging from the ceiling seemed a little too big, and it could fall at any moment. It is quite concerning, because if the metal parts fixing the pillar in place broke, and the pillar fell, the person directly underneath performing the ceremony would be at the highest risk. If something important went missing from this building, surely they have someone make a new one. This thought then flashes the metalworker's sons in her mind. With their father having died recently, there wasn't anyone who could replace what was stolen. She dips out of the palace record room upon hearing the next ceremony is today. She makes it to the building, being stopped by a guard. She knows being a servant she has no authority to enter, but if something happens, it'll be too late. She then baits the guard, accusing him of being part of the conspiracy involving the ceremonial hall theft, causing the guard to get furious and smack her. The pain is throbbing and she's on the verge of losing consciousness. She gets up with blood dripping. She can't give up now though. She reasons with the guard, knowing there must be someone of noble birth in the hall right now. If something were to happen to them, these guards would all lose their heads. The guard still isn't budging until Lohan enters the scene. He scolds them for hurting the young servant girl, making the guard begin to visibly pant. Mao Mao doesn't even want to see the person behind her, but there's no time. She makes a dash inside, and as the pillar comes crashing down, she saves the noble, giving the ceremony in the nick of time. She's gotta stitch her leg up though. What? It's Jinxi. I mean, I kinda knew that. Jinxi is confused at what's going on. He stares at her with a deep concern, wondering what happened to her face. As she passes out, Jinshi shakes her, pleading with her to wake up. He then carries her out of the hall, past her father, with a bloody trail following behind them. Mao Mao awakens, patched up in Jinshi's room. Shui Lian comes to greet her, telling Mao Mao not to push herself too much, as she has 15 stitches. In the living room with Gao Shun, Ba Sen, and Jinshi, Mao Mao explains how she knew about the falling pillar, the death of Master Conan, the fire at the warehouse that led to the death of the ceremonial tools, and the manager of said tools falling ill due to food poisoning at the same time. The metalworker that passed could no longer replace the stolen parts. Mao Mao wondered about Jinshi's true identity, and the connection of these incidents to Sui Rei. Later, Mao Mao learned she was right about Sui Rei being connected to these incidents from Lihaku, but was astonished to hear they had found her corpse, as when the officers came to her room, she had already drunk poison and was collapsed on the floor. More surprising though, is that there are no co-conspirators, with Lihaku calling this a closed case. However, Mao Mao becomes fixated on this. Sui Rei couldn't have possibly caused all these events by herself. Was she even the type of person to commit a self-end? Was she behaving apathetically and unemotionally because she knew she had no future? Then it came to Mao Mao, resurrection medicine. She ran out of her room, barely able to contain her excitement. She'd like to speak to the doctor who examined the corpse. In the morgue, Mao Mao is greeted by the doctor she knew would be there, the one that seemed close to Sui Rei. Mao Mao suspects that the poison Sui Rei drank was made by thorn apple, planted by Sui Rei, which looked like morning glories. The plant is poisonous, but in the right amounts, it can work as an anesthetic. Mao Mao then hacks open the coffin to reveal Sui Rei isn't inside, with the man tumbling, as he had cried when putting her body away. In other words, he'd been exploited with his care for her, so much that he didn't cut open her corpse to find out what poison she used. It was exactly as Sui Rei expected. Hearing this from Mao Mao pissed the doctor off. Jinshi asks what about Sui Rei's corpse, and Mao Mao explains she most likely walked out on her own and wasn't dead, due to a drug that can make a person seem dead for a period of time, which used ingredients from thorn apple and pufferfish. Mao Mao then discovers the now empty coffin Sui Rei was really in that had fingernail marks. By the time the rescuers had come back to open it, she had come back to life. They set up a different coffin with another corpse to replace it, then disguised her as a vendor to walk out. Mao Mao begins to giggle, knowing if the corpse had gotten cremated, Sui Rei would have won, but not on Mao Mao's watch. If she's still alive, Mao Mao wants to meet her, not to arrest her, but a person with such a high intellect and guts to bet her life that she'd make it out would be such a loss. Mao Mao laughs further, desiring to learn how to make the medicine that can bring people back to life. Oh, it seems she laughs so hard she needs her wounds to get restitched. That night, Jinshi reflected on what he discovered about Sui Rei. According to the doctor, she was backed by his teacher, who had taken note of her talents a few years ago and brought her as an adopted daughter. But still, not much is known about her past before then. However, that's not the only thing he's concerned about, with Lohan being in the back of his mind as well. He then reflects on his return to the rear palace tomorrow and who he must be, his refined mannerisms, heavenly smiles, and a voice like honey. The 24-year-old man who became a eunuch when the rear palace became the current emperor's 5 years ago. That's Jinshi. From that day, he decided to wear this mask, drinking this medicine every day to suppress his manhood. When Gao Shun mentions this medicine will one day make Jinshi impotent, Jinshi spits it out, saying the same will happen to him. But Gao Shun is fine since his children are now adults, and he even has grandchildren. Even his youngest son, Ba Sen, is ready to marry at 19, just like Jinshi. Jinshi plays it off saying, Jinshi the eunuch is 24, but he can tell Gao Shun wants him to end his work and find a wife. The next day, they meet with concubine Lolan, who the emperor apparently doesn't find very appealing. She's very fashionable, changing her hairstyle and makeup often, but this confuses the emperor somewhat. When meeting her every time, it's hard to tell who she is. Lolan's father is an important high-ranking official who was the previous Empress Dowager's favorite, so they need to be careful around her. In terms of lacking appeal, concubine Li Shu is similar. The current emperor despises his predecessor's taste for younger girls. He doesn't intend to lay a finger on Li Shu. The Empress Dowager, who gave birth to the current emperor when she was just a girl, also gave birth to another child, some 10-odd years later. At that time, the doctor spent all his time tending to the Empress Dowager, so the birth took place without an issue. However, Duo, who gave birth at the same time, received no attention, resulting in the loss of her uterus. The current emperor's firstborn child was soon lost after. If he had survived... No, Jinshi just felt he needed to have a new prince. Later, Mao Mao takes an assignment back to the rear palace. With Lady Gyokuyo's lunar cycle having stopped, she might be pregnant again. Mao Mao did the same work as she had done as a lady-in-waiting, tasting for poisons. Seeing the emperor with Ling Li gave Mao Mao a better impression of him as not just some lewd middle-aged guy. At the verdigris house, Li Haku is distraught to hear rumors that one of the 3 princesses is being bought out. Mao Mao heads to work at the Jade Pavilion, but is summoned by Li Haku, who wants to know the cost to buy out a courtesan. Mao Mao opens his question with the 2 candidates who would be eager to buy Pai Rin. The first, an old master of a merchant family who had come to the verdigris house, even when they were struggling. And the second, a high-ranking official in his early 30s who's apparently very compatible with her in bed. However, a point of concern is how tired he looks the next day. Li Haku is unsure on what Mao Mao means by this, so she elaborates. Anytime Pai Rin feels unsatisfied in bed, she'll try to seduce anybody and everybody. She's a nymphomaniac, but even so, she really helped raise Mao Mao, so she also has a strong maternal side. Mao Mao thinks of Li Haku being in love with Pai Rin while fully understanding what her job is. He's an incompetent dog, but also an earnest man, a lovable idiot who's working to climb the ranks for a woman. And he seems to have the stamina to last with Pai Rin. He's not a bad candidate to buy her out. After telling Li Haku Pai Rin's upfront cost of 10,000 silvers, he gets depressed knowing the price is 10 years of his salary. But he could still manage. She then tells him to take off his clothes, so she can figure out if Li Haku has the kind of body Pai Rin would like. And man, he's certainly ripped. Mao Mao observes him in different poses, believing this could actually work. Except she needs him to remove his last article of clothing. But suddenly, Jinshi barges in, not looking too happy. Upon learning she was called for help, and was closely studying Li Haku's physique, Jinshi certainly doesn't get any happier. Mao Mao can apparently tell a person's lifestyle by simply looking at someone's physique. Oftentimes, clients don't divulge their lives much to an apothecary, so it's a skill she learned over the years. Jinshi asks if she could figure him out by looking at his body, which surprises Mao Mao because she can tell he's jealous of Li Haku. But not the way she was thinking, as Jinshi is surprised to hear he's not the body type for big sister Pai Rin. In his room, Li Haku trains his body to deal with his troubles buying Pai Rin. He gets a knock on the door and somehow ends up face to face with Jinshi. Jinshi found out about him looking to buy Pai Rin and offers him a loan of 20,000 silver. Li Haku thinks it's strange for Jinshi, a stranger, to offer him help, but it's because Mao Mao trusts him and Jinshi looked into his background. He's the son of a regional official and squad leader. Li Haku finds the offer tempting, but he feels he doesn't need that much, maybe only even a quarter of that. He declines Jinshi's offer because Pai Rin is a woman he's serious about. How can he call himself a man if he can't buy her out with his own silver? Hearing this, Jinshi smiles and takes his leave. Throwing the offer out of the window, Li Haku is unsure about what to do for money. Maybe he can show off at the next training session or ask for more work. He doesn't know when he'll see her, but he doesn't want to just buy her out without telling her. He wants to know how she feels. Receiving a message from Pai Rin herself, Mao Mao learns that Li Haku doesn't need all that money he's hoping to raise, as long as she loves him. But the confusion with a courtesan being purchased is probably coming from the fact that Lo Han was looking to buy someone. A new spring began, and Lady Gyokuyo's pregnancy became a certainty. Little Ling Li loved to play with her mother's tummy. She then brings some paper over to Mao Mao so they can draw together, and when Mao Mao draws her a poisonous mushroom, Hong Yan gives Mao Mao a scolding smack. In Jinshi's office, Lo Han discusses a blue rose, as he's looking to have Jinshi arrange them somewhere in the palace. With roses being out of season, Jinshi comes to Mao Mao for help, to have the roses done for next month's garden party, only to get upset when even she mentions roses won't bloom for another 2 months. After learning the request is from a certain military weirdo, Mao Mao takes on the job regardless, because she doesn't want to run away from him forever. She'd love to crack that smirking monocle of his. Day after day, Mao Mao works with Xiaolan in the steam bathhouse she had built in the Crystal Pavilion to make an artificial garden house for the roses to bloom. Mao Mao was exhausted, not seeing any success, working herself to exhaustion, until one day, Xiaolan shows her a budding flower. The day of the garden party comes, with the debut of the new pure consort, Lolan, who's taking Gyokyuyo's seat this year due to her being pregnant and needing to keep it a secret. Jinshi walks forward, handing a vase filled with a variety of colors, including the blue roses Lohan had requested. With many onlookers staring at him with jealous eyes, he finds most concerning are the people he can't read, like Lolan's father Shisho, who won the Empress's affection, and even more troublesome, the military strategist Lohan. Mao Mao wakes up after resting on Yinghua. Jinshi comes over to ask how Mao Mao achieved the creation of the blue roses. She explains they were all originally white, and she had dyed them using colored water. But with the final stage set, she was ready to confront her father. Mao Mao challenges her father to a game of Go. Best of 5, first to win 3 matches wins. If Lohan wins, Mao Mao will become his daughter. But if Mao Mao wins, he must buy a courtesan out from the verdigris house. She won't say who though. 2 more rules though. Mao Mao presents some liquid that with 3 mouthfuls would become a strong poison. She pours the liquid into 3 out of 5 cups and scrambles them so they randomize. After each match, the winner chooses a cup for the loser to drink. And the second rule, if someone forfeits, they lose. With the first loss, Mao Mao must drink. A second loss, and she drinks again. The third match, Mao Mao wins with a checkmate. However, it's because Lohan lets her win. He can't let his daughter take poison, even by accident. He deliberately lost so he could make an attempt to drink 1 cup of poison, avoiding Mao Mao's potential end. And he gets it right away, freaking Jinshi out, knowing Mao Mao has lost her ace in the hole. However, Lohan doesn't feel so good and passes out on the spot, confusing Jinshi. Mao Mao gives him some water and explains he's not actually poisoned, he's just a lightweight when it comes to drinking. Looks like Mao Mao's won, so Lohan is going to buy a courtesan from the verdigris house. Lohan spent his whole life only thinking of everyone as Go pieces, pawns with their proper places in life, until he played Go against an unbeatable courtesan from the verdigris house named Fengshen. So confident in his abilities, he began laughing because she completely dominated him. But he was surprised to see what a human face truly looked like. Her eyes were balsam fruit, which could pop with a single touch. They kept playing Go and chess for several years. Fengshen was born at the brothel. Her personality was only shaped by pride. With her talent, her price kept going up and up, so much she could only afford to see her once every 3 months. This price kept going up, in a bidding war amongst her fans. Though Lohan had climbed the ranks as a military man, his stepbrothers had taken his right to inherit the family title. He could never dream of reaching her price. One day, however, they played a game of Go, where the loser would give the winner anything they desired. While playing, their hands eventually held each other and they spent the night together. Later, due to some family issues, Lohan was forced by his father to study abroad for 3 years. He didn't think it would have taken so long to come back. On his return, letters piled up from Fengshen, with one particularly bloodied, and a sack that he thought were branches at first. However, he was horrified to realize they were her fingers. He ran as hard as he could through the pouring rain. The small finger represented something he was too foolish to realize at the time. He arrived screaming at the verdigris house, asking for Fengshen, getting beaten by the madam for his foolishness. He had never considered why she had lost her value and was no longer getting buy offers, was that she was pregnant with their child. He knew a courtesan who lost all value would have to receive any and every customer for money, leading to diseases. He screamed in misery over his grave mistake he made, drowning in his failure. Lohan woke up in the verdigris house to Mei Mei, who used to be an apprentice to Fengshen. Mei Mei served him tea, which he spat out quickly because it was so bitter, but became happy learning that Mao Mao had made it. Looking at the gift he received from Mao Mao, Lohan couldn't help but think he wanted to be with the daughter Fengshen left for him. He hated his daughter, but still wanted her near him, and is displeased that man put his hand on his daughter 3 times during his Go match. The madam then brings Lohan to take his pick for courtesan purchase. However, no matter how beautifully they dress, all of them look like Go stones to him. He comes toward Mei Mei because she's always been good to him. However, she walks towards the door, and hearing a song from a familiar woman, Lohan runs towards the song despite the madam not wanting him near her. He now understood the message Mao Mao was trying to tell him with the flower she sent. There's a flower for him that has retained its beauty, despite the fact that it withered, and inside the annex, he finds Fengshen singing a song while looking at the moon. and it brings him to shed a tear. The madam follows, telling him to get out and pick from the other courtesans. But no matter what, he wants this woman. He'll pay whatever the madam wants, 100,000, 200, or whatever. Oh man, I really teared up a little watching this. Lohan puts the ghost stones in Feng Shen's hand, and seeing her beautiful face, he tells her, "Let's play Go," weeping in joy at the sight of the smiling beautiful woman, just as he remembered. Seeing this brings Mei Mei to tears as well, wishing Feng Shen had been honest about her feelings from the start. Lohan will buy this woman who's beautiful as a balsam flower. Back in the palace, Basen scoffs, remarking that troublesome father and daughter duo, referring to concubine Lolan and her father, who had pushed hard to get his daughter in the rear palace. Mao Mao gets served a meal for all her hard work, but before she can eat it, Jinshi comments on how he thought Mao Mao hated the weirdo strategist. She replies she doesn't hate him. After all, she exists because of him. Knowing her mother, she wouldn't have gotten pregnant if she didn't want to. There's drugs to prevent or abort pregnancies, so ending it would have been easy early on. She recalls her mother must have lost her mind when things hadn't worked out, so much that she was willing to hurt herself. She brings up the fact that Lohan never visits Jinshi outside of his office. It's because Lohan can't recognize human faces. Jinshi is unsure of what she means until she explains her father can tell the shapes of eyes and mouths, but he's unable to view the parts together as a whole. She learned this from her adopted father, but for some reason, he's able to discern Mao Mao's and Lo Men's faces. She definitely dislikes her father, but doesn't hate him. She's just grateful she was able to become Lo Men's daughter, but respects her biological father's intellect, as he was able to help her save Jinshi. He doesn't make the decisions the same way Mao Mao does using evidence, but instead his gut feeling. Mao Mao is only annoyed because if her father had taken action based on that feeling, she might have had her hands on the resurrection drug right now. Later, Mao Mao learns of the details from Mei Mei on who Lohan had bought. Mei Mei still plans on doing courtesan work for a bit longer, but when she does get bought up, she'd love for Mao Mao to dance with this shawl. At night, on the castle walls, Mao Mao practices her graceful dance among the stars. Surprised to see Jinshi had been watching. This startles her, causing her to trip and nearly fall off the wall, only for Jinshi to barely catch her. She wonders what he's doing here, but he got a report that another weird woman was climbing the outer wall. He pats her on the head, telling her not to cause any more trouble. He then has her explain herself. In the pleasure district, when sending off a courtesan who's been bought out, it's customary for the other courtesans to dance. Jinshi is surprised she knows how to dance. However, she was taught dancing as a part of the bare minimum of education. Jinshi then details how he heard Lohan had bought out a courtesan, and how he'll be on vacation for at least 10 days. At the Verdigris house, they're apparently having a banquet for a whole 7 days and nights. Oh, it looks like Mao Mao's wounds have opened up again. She'll definitely need some restitching. But Jinshi isn't going to let her do that here. He grabs her and jumps down the wall, and puts her in a princess carry. I'm sure she wasn't expecting that. As they go together, Mao Mao has something important to say to him. Something she's been meaning to say for a while. She grabs his face, getting close, and tells him she'd like that ox bazour now. Getting upset, Jinshi headbutts her, and the two continue together under the stars. At the courtesan house, while Mei Mei cleaned the annex that Mao Mao's mother once stayed in, she found a pebble, one that gave her joy and memories. The madam was excitedly filling out the numerous orders of books Mao Mao had requested. Moving to the palace, Jinshi was visiting the wise consort to the emperor, Lady Li Hua, smelling the beautiful flowers she wanted. Then, he visited Li Shu, the virtuous consort, followed by Lolan, the newest consort whose father requested a little too many additional maids after the garden party. And finally, Lady Gyokuyo, who giggled noticing Jinshi was probably looking around for Mao Mao. So she informed him Mao Mao was working at the clinic today. Finding her deep in her work while the room was engulfed in hot vapor, he asked what she was doing. Apparently she was making perfume oil. While cleaning the medical office, she found distillation equipment, and thus started using leftover roses she prepared when having made blue roses the other day. She asked him if there was something he needed, and he made the excuse that with a scent this strong, anyone would be curious. And besides, doing this here was a bit more difficult compared to how much space she'd be given at Lady Gyokuyo's Jade Pavilion. Mao Mao began to whisper to him that while that was true, Some perfume oils had an effect that terminates pregnancy. She didn't want to risk Yokyuyo's unborn child, and had to keep things on the down low, since the quack Dr. Guan talked too much. She then let Jinshi smell her distilled alcohol, causing him to shrink back from its strength. She wasn't using it for drinking though, but instead as a disinfectant. She wanted to keep the Jade Pavilion as clean as possible. Then, hearing the loud thud of a package delivery, Mao Mao began to panic. With Guan mentioning it was something for her, she started hissing at him like a cat to cut him off, and told Jinshi to sit down so she could prepare tea for him. However, with him being curious about the package contents, she explained it was just a small package from her family, nothing special. This made him all the more curious, so she embarrassingly admitted they were undergarments, which was definitely a lie. Gao Shun then logically pointed out that for just undergarments, why did they require 2 men to bring it in? She really explained that the problem at the rear palace was that being a virgin was in demand. Most of the women servants gathered in the rear palace were virgins. Even if favored by the emperor, if they made a mistake due to ignorance, it's pitiful. She ordered these books to help them study in advance. She had them delivered here to the medical office so that Gokyuyo's head lady-in-waiting, Hong Yang, wouldn't find out. She ordered many for the emperor as well, since he loved to read. Looking at Gao Shun reading through one of the books, Mao Mao was surprised to hear him compliment the excellent art depictions made with good paper. She was relieved, thinking he was going to criticize it. Books like these were sometimes used as dowries. Even those who couldn't read could enjoy the illustrations, so these books did have popular demand. Gao Shun then whispered to Jin Shi that he should consider keeping a copy, which Jin Shi nervously replied he wasn't thinking of anything like that at all. But now looking further at the books, Gao Shun commented the risque parts needed some censorship, and now he and Jin Shi were confiscating them for the time being. While eating a bun, Xiaolan began reciting the lines of a popular novel, until Mao Mao ruined the moment by discussing manure, causing Xiaolan to choke. Xiaolan hadn't actually read the novel herself because she was illiterate, but enjoyed the stories listening to the ones who could read aloud. Which is why you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I mean, you could watch these anime yourself, which is fine by the way, or you could listen to me narrate for you in my beautiful voice. I'm just kidding guys, I'm not that full of myself. However, my channel is full of wonderful stories you can watch and listen to. So come on, hit that subscribe, I'll be your guy. Since even the illiterate maids were talking about it, Mao Mao figured the story must really be widespread. Even her fellow ladies-in-waiting were reading it back at the Jade Pavilion, because the emperor had distributed to all his consorts with instructions to share it with others. Mao Mao then noticed it was the books that were confiscated from her the other day, meaning she wasn't getting commission from this. But now she wondered why distribute something considered indecent to well-brought-up consorts. She figured it had to be something political, and that Jin Shi was up to something. The fellow ladies-in-waiting began clamoring about how they wished they could share copies with those outside the palace. However, they could not share these official books. So, Mao Mao suggested they handprint copies, goading Ailan by complimenting her pretty handwriting. Mao Mao now assumed Jin Shi's intent was to spread these books amongst the inner palace. That way, more people would try to learn how to read. When she was serving as one of his maids, she remembered him asking how they could improve the literacy rate of the women in service. Even so, this was quite a roundabout way of going about it. On another day, Xiaolan suddenly shrieked, asking Mao Mao to teach her how to read and write. The girl who always read the novel to her had read it too many times and lost her voice. She made a copy of the book for Xiaolan, but of course, Xiaolan couldn't read. Seeing Xiaolan's desire to learn made Mao Mao light up. It started with writing Xiaolan's name, which was difficult at first, but she wasn't discouraged. Once she left the palace, she'd have to find her own job, and she knew being able to write would be useful. Mao Mao then praised her once again for thinking of her future. On a dark, windy night, a servant wandered about the inner palace, was suddenly attacked by an ominous being. We find Mao Mao playing with Princess Ling Li the next day, who's been given permission to walk around since staying just within the palace was getting a bit cramped. Now she's running around everywhere. Lady Gokyuyo wanted Mao Mao and Hong Yan to accompany her daughter with 2 guards. Until now, all of the emperor's children had died young. It might seem overly protective for just a walk, but it couldn't be helped. Gokyuyo then asked Mao Mao to teach Ling Li about flowers and creatures along the walk. thinking it'd be useful knowledge given they didn't know where the princess might marry in the future. Although Ling Li was still young, in about 10 years, she'd be married off somewhere. If she goes off to another country, there's no guarantee she'd be welcomed. Knowledge of medicine and poison wouldn't hurt. Mao Mao noted everyone's reactions to the princess varied. Everyone had their own view of the princess. Eventually, the princess herself would understand the meaning behind those gazes. While still on their walk, Ling Li overheard the meowing of a cat within a tight-spaced alley. Mao Mao tried reaching for it, only for the kitty to run off into the forest. It hissed at them, jumping over Mao Mao and instead getting caught swiftly by another servant. The servant gave the cat to Mao Mao and suggested the cat was hungry before taking off. Ling Li wanted to play with the kitty, but unfortunately started to cry with Mao Mao telling her not to touch it because it was dirty. Getting cleaned at the clinic, Mao Mao thought it was strange since there were hardly any pets in the inner palace. Keeping animals required permission, and for cats and dogs, sterilizing was mandatory. Ideally, she wanted to bathe the kitty, but in its current state, it definitely didn't have the strength. So instead, she decided to wipe its dirty body with a hand towel and use oil to kill the fleas. She then fed the kitty with goat's milk placed within livestock intestines, so as to emulate the feeding from a nipple. Guan gushed at the cute sight of the eating kitty. That night, the emperor decided to visit the Jade Pavilion, telling Mao Mao he's decided to keep the kitten, leaving it in her care. He was quite the doting parent for his little daughter. He thought Mao Mao was the perfect name for someone being the caretaker of the kitty. She would eventually bathe the kitty, feeding it milk until it got healthier, then letting it eat shredded chicken. When placing it in a wooden box filled with sand, it began relieving itself on its own. Jin Shi eventually came for a visit, hearing the cat would be ready to play with the princess soon. Learning Mao Mao was relieved the kitten was female, and they wouldn't need to neuter her, Mao Mao got embarrassed given Jin Shi was a eunuch, so she apologized by providing sweets. While Jin Shi played with the cat, he was surprised to hear Mao Mao didn't like cats in particular. And while Jin Shi did, he certainly didn't like them as much as Guan and Gao Shun. According to cat lovers, the mystery of not knowing what they're thinking is what made them charming. Mao Mao brought up watching them was so captivating, one couldn't look away and eventually you'd even feel like touching them. And how it was frustrating they'd only warm up to you when food was given. All these things were how Jin Shi saw Mao Mao. He then began smelling the kitty up close, uttering he was starting to understand. In the end, where the kitten came from remained a mystery. It was concluded that the cat sneaked into a cart entering the rear palace. Afterward, the cat was given a grand title, Rat Exterminator, by the emperor himself. In short, it was tasked with getting rid of the rats from the medical storage. However, the fact that its name also became Mao Mao was something our Mao Mao found unacceptable. Jin Shi and Gao Shun discussed a large traveling caravan with important merchants coming to the palace soon. At the Jade Pavilion, the ladies in waiting are preparing the seasonal attire. Ailan mentions new attendants coming soon, as they'll need extra help with Lady Gyokyo's pregnancy. The other reason being since consort Lolan had over 50 attendants and servants at her side. They felt Gyokyo needed more, because more servants equals more importance. Mao Mao noted caravan marketplaces not too unusual in the pleasure district, but in the rear palace, where fun was scarce, shopping like this was something they all looked forward to. Then, with Yinghua clamoring about slacking off, their head lady in waiting, Hong Yang, had to put them back in line. At the Crystal Pavilion, Lady Li Hua brushed her tummy, brimming with hope she'd be able to hold new life within. She gave instructions to her head lady in waiting, Shin, to have one of their attendants purchase wares at the caravan. But downstairs, receiving a message from the clinic, Shin's face became dark. The caravan would stay for 5 days. With consorts and their attendants having fun, there's no way the lower-ranked servants could join in. Xiaolan was envious because she wanted new clothing too, although Mao Mao had to remind her she wouldn't be allowed to wear anything outside of their uniforms. The rear palace was a very unique place. There were so many people but no stores, and the only doctor was the quack doctor, Guan. Some might believe if anyone got sick, it'd spread quickly, but that's not the case. Hygiene management was strict here. The sewage system flows underground, connecting to the Great River without passing through a moat. The Empress Dowager, known for her skill, utilized Western waterway techniques. Xiaolan then tugged at Mao Mao's skirt, sweetly asking to go shopping together on the last day the caravans were here. Mao Mao didn't mind at all. Back at the Jade Pavilion, Lady Gyokyo seems to have bought a lot. This was still nothing in comparison to Lady Li Hua, who was also quite generous with her gifts to her servants, or Li Shu, whose servants sweet-talked her into buying them whatever they wanted, while Lo Lan had a taste for anything extravagant. In contrast, Gyokyo was quite frugal, fitting everything into one room. Touching one of the new outfits, Mao Mao pulled back, observing that most of them had their skirts tied with a sash right under the chest. This was a problem since Gyokyo's pregnancy was still a secret. Normally, merchants bring outfits that appeal to their customers. For Gyokyo, they'd choose sashes tied at the waist. But as her belly grows, she'd prefer loose-fitting clothing. Mao Mao considered she might be overthinking this, but what if the attendants had deliberately bought these designs to expose Gyokyo's secret? She subtly told Gyokyo about buying outfits with designs tied at the waist tomorrow, which the consort and Hong Yang picked up on immediately. On the last day, there were only leftover wares. But this did not deter Xiaolan's joy. Mao Mao bought her some ribbons for her hair, making Xiaolan cheery and affectionate. Mao Mao thought if she had a younger sister, she might be like this creature. While the caravan didn't have any medicines, they did have tea leaves and spices. And there was one more reason Mao Mao came on the last day: discounts. In a unique place like the rear palace, she already knew they wouldn't be selling goods at fair prices. She wasn't going to let herself be overcharged so easily. That was her inner madam speaking. Looking to buy jasmine tea leaves, she came across the girl who had caught Cat Mao Mao before, Shisui. She must be another laundry attendant since she wore the same outfit as Xiaolan. Back at the clinic, Guan cheerfully commented he didn't know Mao Mao had friends. Ouch. Rude, but totally true. The other girls were lighting up over the kitty, asking for its name. However, Mao Mao only called it Rat Exterminator, not wanting to let its real name be known. They enjoyed the jasmine flowering tea and mooncakes, where Shisui asked if it's always such a big celebration around this time of year. Mao Mao took note of this also being Shisui's first time at the caravan. If she had entered the rear palace around the same time as Lo Lan, then she's surely been here for about half a year. Shisui then brings up a strange smell coming from the north. Guan assumed it must be a clogged waterway, and with Shisui presenting her work from that side, we learned she was quite skilled at drawing. Mao Mao remembered insects could be used as medicine. Mantis eggs were an energizer, and earthworms had fever-reducing properties. Then, with Shisui mentioning a lot of spiders in the north, Mao Mao's cat-like excitement bloomed. She wanted to test spider silk for its hemostatic properties. The two girls could bond over wanting to see the insects, but in different ways. A few days after the caravan left, fragrant oils became a huge trend at the rear palace. The scents had a strong stink at times. While on their own, they could smell good. Mixed, they could be dangerous. One of the servants accidentally dropped some clothing onto Mao Mao, where she sniffed, smelling a rose scent. She considered making a profit by selling rose water again, but remembering it had a bad effect on pregnant women, she quickly got up to smell more of the laundry, even burying her head in some of it. She needed to check the Crystal Pavilion, since the servants there were the most easily influenced by trends. Where inside, she smelt outfit after outfit with no consent, but became nervous at the feet of Shin. Jinshi scolded Mao Mao after receiving a protest letter from the Crystal Pavilion's head lady-in-waiting. Mao Mao apologized, saying she'd do it next time with consent, only irritating him. Her reasons were quite serious though. She had him read a note she drafted with words: rose, benzoin, blue catalpa, frankincense, and cinnamon. These were the perfumes and oils the ladies wore that she smelled today. The issue? They were all harmful to pregnant women. Additionally, spices and tea leaves were also sold at the caravan. Jasmine had the effect of contracting the uterus. Poppy was often used as an abortifacient for courtesans. In small quantities, these would cause no issue, but in large amounts would increase chances of miscarriage. Mao Mao felt she was too careless, swept up in the festive atmosphere. She commented on this resembling the time the poisonous face powder was being used in the palace. An incident when coincidences piled up enough to lead to the inevitable. The palace attendant who revived from a near-death state and fled, and the whereabouts of Sui Rei were still unknown. From the assassination attempt at the mid-festival, Mao Mao surmised many people were involved. But how far did their hands reach? Her father's words of not making conclusions based on speculations rang in her head. She still wasn't sure what was coincidence and what was nefarious. About to drink her tea, Jinshi interrupted, asking for some as well. The same cup as hers. He wanted to know its properties, so she explained it could calm the mind, and also lead to infertility on the male side. Not a good reminder for a guy who played the part of a eunuch. Mao Mao felt her joke had gone too far, and went to get snacks for him. He instead chose to leave after drinking her jasmine tea, where outside, Gao Shun informed him the mid-ranking Lady Jin had passed away by poison. It was reported as food poisoning, but Gyokuyo remembered Jin had been bedridden the past year. Guan filled Mao Mao in on a missing woman named Tao, who had been a hard-working and earnest young lady. Her term of service was ending and her wedding was approaching too. He had no idea what happened, but here, a lot of women struggled with interpersonal relationships. That was the nature of the rear palace, a garden where 2,000 women stirred and schemed. Jinshi then discussed the emperor handing out novels to the consorts with Mao Mao. Mao Mao explained that the attendants read them as well, and many of them were gaining proficiency in both reading and writing. He was glad, and presented his plan to create a writing school for commoners. With her saying it was a good idea, both Jinshi and Gao Shun were appalled. Where was her usual gaze? Was something wrong with her health? Giving her usual disdainful look lit Jin up, grossing her out. She did point out a problem, however, with the school being located in the south side. This was the prime spot for senior and middle-ranking consorts. Many of them were very proud, and probably not comfortable about maidservants being educated. Better to move it to the north side, where there was less maintained and frequented area, and presented as vocational training on the surface. If people viewed it as a means to make a living, more would gather. Jinshi then switched subjects to the other reason he brought Mao Mao to his office. He had heard a lady at the medical office, referring to her, had been eating matsutake mushrooms there. He decided to send her on a mission to investigate potential poisonous mushrooms around the palace. She started on the north side, excitedly picking various mushrooms, until she sniffed a pungent scent. Perhaps the weird smell Shisui mentioned before. Was it leaked sewage acting as nutrients for the mushrooms? She returned to the Jade Pavilion dirty and ragged. It was a very fulfilling day for her. She managed to harvest some mushrooms that could be used as medicine, and told Guan that they were poisonous so he wouldn't eat them. Seeing Gyokuyo and Hong Yang after changing, she noticed the black cords tied on their wrists, signifying the death of a person of noble status here at the rear palace. Hong Yang explained Jin was at the top of the intermediate consorts, and daughter of a high official. For the past year, she had been unwell and confined to her quarters. Suffering from food poisoning was her end. Hong Yang spoke in an unusually harsh tone, mentioning that the emperor never visited her and she should have returned to her family home. She spoke this way because Lady Jin was someone she remembered to have a difficult personality. She was intensely jealous of other consorts and maidservants. She would spread slander and resort to violence against those of lower status. That was around the time Lady Gyokuyo had been poisoned with Ling Li still in her tummy. Of course, Jin wouldn't directly harass higher-ranking consorts. Jinshi had tried to inquire about it from her. However, she snidely responded there was no evidence of her committing malevolent acts. Hong Yang was relieved that things ended this way. Putting things together, Mao Mao wondered if it was all connected to why Jinshi had her look into the mushrooms. Receiving a flower to mourn Jin's death, she noticed her attendant's hand had a rash. And seeing the dead body, Mao Mao wished she could have observed her symptoms when she was still alive. A woman by the name of So came running in, disrupting the ceremony, maniacally laughing at Jin's death. The woman who had caused the incident yesterday was a low-ranked consort, daughter of a wealthy merchant family, good-natured, and the emperor would occasionally visit her chambers. However, around this time 2 years ago, she contracted a mysterious illness and was dropped from the consort's position. But even if she returned to her family, she would no longer be able to marry. Keeping her in the rear palace must have been the emperor's kindness. She must have interrupted Jin's funeral believing the mid-consort was the cause of the illness. Spotting the red fungi, Mao Mao found exactly what she'd been looking for. In the medical office, she showed it to Jinshi and Gao Shun, having them all wear face coverings to protect them from the highly poisonous mushroom. Even a tiny fragment ingested was enough to reach a lethal dose, and just touching it released toxicity. She wanted Jinshi not to get too close, Otherwise, he could get a rash and scar like the one she had. Long ago, Mao Mao had found these mushrooms while gathering herbs with her father. Even washing it off immediately, it still caused her scarring. The rest of her scars were from her own experiments though. Simple hobby work that flabbergasted Jinshi. She'd never shown them to anyone before. Bringing up Jin's blistering skin and hair loss, she had Jinshi explained what he wanted her to look into. He elaborated on Lady So contracting a mysterious disease 2 years ago, with Lady Jin being the suspected culprit. But there was no conclusive evidence to prove she administered the poison. And then a year ago, Jin started exhibiting the same symptoms as So. Perhaps she accidentally touched the poison while using it on someone else. After that, Jin became depressed and was like a different person. He visited to check on her once a month, but she was barely able to speak. She was a proud and dignified consort to begin with. Unable to bear it, she poisoned herself. That's the testimony of the serving maids who attended her anyways. Mao Mao felt something was off, because ingesting the mushroom caused stomach pain, vomiting, and numbness. Also, inflammation in the mouth, but she's never heard of it spreading to the face. The swelling on Jin's face looked quite recent, as if the poisonous mushroom had been directly rubbed onto it. Meanwhile, her hands remained perfectly clean. The blistered hands belonged to... With Mao Mao not finishing, Jinshi pulled her close to have her speak up. With a look of disgust, she pushed him away, asking for a few days and some eunuchs to help her. She gathered information, asking various people, and looked around until she found the spot on the north side of the palace. An area with an increased density of mushrooms growing. The eunuchs dug it up, smelling the rotten smell of a corpse that adorned noble jewelry. It was later identified as Lady Jin's body. Her family crest was on the ornaments. Mao Mao surmised it was about a year ago, and she believed someone else took her place. The body at the funeral was likely the missing palace woman, Tao, who looked similar to Jin. If her face was covered, the only ones who could identify her would probably be her attendants. It would have been easily possible to deceive those who only visited once a month. In other words, Tao conspired together with Jin's attendants. Mao Mao didn't know the details, but had her own assumptions. The trigger was jealousy. Lady Jin didn't like that a palace woman resembling her was being courted, and resented the fact that the emperor never visited her. In fact, Tao was treated terribly. Perhaps that led to a quarrel, where, whether murder or accident, Lady Jin died. The attendants, perhaps out of self-preservation and a sympathy for Tao, proposed to cover up Jin's death. Tao could hardly refuse, but as the discussion for marriage progressed, it became impossible to continue the deception. They killed her. Jinshi asked how Mao Mao knew where the body was buried, so she excitedly presented her evidence. Mushrooms. They often grew around animal carcasses and feces. She got into a passionate rant, but then it hit onto her what was going to be the result of her revealing another passion. She quickly grasped her mushroom basket, containing many she had yet to experiment with. Unfortunately though, Jinshi had Gao Shun confiscated. Observing the only mushroom that had fallen on the ground, she thought about mushrooms that grew directly on corpses. And if they existed, what form would they take? What properties would they have? Where will her curiosities lead her? In the Jade Pavilion, all the ladies were marveling over the mirror they had recently procured. Apparently, making mirrors out of glass was difficult in this time period, so the only way to get them was through trade in the West. Because of the price, Mao Mao knew breaking one by accident would result in her head getting chopped off. We learned the mirror was sent via special envoy, and one was sent to all of the high-ranking concubines, perhaps to start the beginning of a large-scale international business deal. Gao Shun visited later, asking Mao Mao for consultation on a recent issue. He explained that a rich family had 2 daughters. They were close in age and had similar appearances, and when they had come of age, their parents became overprotective, never allowing them to leave the house, not even together. A lady-in-waiting was assigned to monitor them, and they spent their days in their house. The lady-in-waiting felt bad and occasionally took the girls out. But one day, the father found out, and then after, stationed male servants outside the room to watch them, locking the doors at night so they couldn't get out. Then one day, one of the sisters came out as pregnant, claiming to be carrying the child of a wizard. Mao Mao at first questioned if the lady-in-waiting had taken the girls out again, but Gao Shun explained she had been fired as a warning to the others. Hong Yang then proposed that perhaps one of the male servants had done something. However, Gao Shun added the servants weren't allowed to approach the room, even while monitoring them. With all the information thus far, Mao Mao found the conundrum to be outside of her realm of knowledge. If the question had been something like, is it possible to become pregnant without seeing a man, she could explain it. The body can trick itself into believing it's pregnant while not actually. There was a case in the brothel where a young courtesan claimed she was carrying the child of a man she loved. However, she was not pregnant, but her period stopped while her chest and abdomen swelled. Belief in psyche could emulate the symptoms. When Mao Mao pressed on the certainty one of the daughters was pregnant, Gao Shun nervously replied, perhaps, and instead shifted the conversation to whether the younger sister managed to slip away unnoticed by surveillance. He presented the floor plan and pointed at the detached building where the sisters stayed connected to the main house by corridor. If they wanted to leave, it was only via that corridor. There were windows on the detached building, but the servants kept watch of those specifically from the third and first floor. The interior visibility from the outside was low, but that didn't matter much considering the sisters often sat by the window to do embroidery. Mao Mao felt key details were being left out, despite the fact Gao Shun knew a lot of fine details. While she thought about things a little too hard, Gao Shun presented a gift from Jin Shi, who wanted to apologize for the delay in delivering the ox bazaar. The rare item had become high in demand recently, so when opening the gift, Mao Mao lit up, discovering she'd been given a bear's gallbladder. She then began yapping about its usefulness in medicines for the digestive system. Now revitalized in heart, Mao Mao went further in her speculation of the daughters. She placed 2 nuts on the floor plan by the windows they'd normally do their embroidery, then placed a mirror that could make it appear like another nut was there. There's a chance there was only one daughter in the room while the other was simply an image in the mirror. On another day, Jinshi came to Mao Mao asking about an otherworldly beauty who shed pearls as tears. She just gave him an annoyed stare because she wanted to say there was an otherworldly beauty right in front of her. He didn't know the exact details, but there was a beauty like a moon fairy. When she danced, lights danced with her as if blessing her. When she cried, the tears turned into pearls as they fell down. He had heard she was a courtesan from the pleasure district. Seeing her was a serious request from the special envoy visiting now. This envoy was visiting from the west, and had been told the story of the moon fairy over and over again. They wanted Jin Shi to find her so they could meet, and he needed to do what he could since they were important diplomatic partners. Thinking back on what she knew of the pleasure district, it hit Mao Mao. Jin Shi felt a little hopeless. Since the story was spanning decades, perhaps this moon fairy wasn't even alive anymore, but was now surprised to hear Mao Mao saying she was very much alive, and that he'd met her before. The moon fairy was in fact the madam of the Verdigris house. The envoys were serious about meeting the moon fairy, even though her performance was likely 50 years ago. Jin Shi had tried showing them other beauties, but the envoys were unsatisfied. The envoys were also female, so nighttime services were off the table. We learned just how important these envoys were, as they completely controlled the western and northern trade points. He was at his wit's end trying to fulfill this request. So, Mao Mao met with the madam, who wasn't eager to visit even though she'd been fully paid to come. She was proud to have welcomed a foreign envoy over 50 years ago, where she was selected as the main dancer to perform on stage. She was the highest class courtesan in the whole pleasure district back then. Mao Mao was at a loss, thinking the madam seemed like a dead twig now. But back then, the madam was very tall and curvy. That said, a lot of the event was improvised, so they had difficulty preparing. They had to plan everything, like the phases of the moon, and remove obstacles to give guests a better view. The nearby orchard meant lots of insects, so the servants had to pick out every single larva from the leaves. Even after all that work though, people tampered with the madam's costume that night, rubbing insect carcass on it. Still, the madam dealt with it, skillfully hiding the smear with her dance techniques. Presenting the painting of herself from 50 years ago, Mao Mao was surprised that this mesmerizing beauty would one day become a penny pitcher. The painting was commissioned by the envoy after he returned home, saying he saw a moon goddess or something. Discussing the matter with Jin Shi again, they were all trying to figure out who would be best to fill the role of the moon fairy. It had to be a tall beauty, someone that Gao Shun immediately caught onto, making Jin Shi nervous. Staring at the old portrait of the madam, Mao Mao thought of how rumors spread rapidly. The further and wider they spread, the more they deviate from the truth. Reaching the north end of the rear palace, Mao Mao observed a shrine-like building in a pond. It is said that in the past, another people once lived in the area, and the remaining structures, outer walls, and underground waterways were still in use today. Trying to surprise Mao Mao by covering her eyes, Shisui appeared. She was out here running errands and picked up a pretty caterpillar. that Mao Mao knows other ladies would consider a level of harassment from being presented. More importantly for Shisui though, she had never seen these types of caterpillars before. Mao Mao surmised, since the spot had been where a lot of foreign trading occurred, that these bugs must have come mixed in with goods from abroad. They weren't butterfly caterpillars though, they were moths, nocturnal insects. Perhaps what the madam had danced with on that night around 50 years ago. And hearing from Shisui that these types of moths glimmered in the moonlight, she needed her help. Preparation began, set up for the event. Moths collected in cages. A few days later, a banquet was held to welcome the envoys. It took place in the northern garden where the moon spirit appeared 50 years ago. Normally, men were forbidden in the palace, but as a special exception, male officials were granted entry. Even senior-ranking consorts participated in the event. Attendees enjoyed the banquet from inside their carriages. This was also a gesture to avoid treating the foreign envoys as mere spectacles. Moreover, raising their curtain up to allow the emperor to see their faces showed just how much confidence they had. The performances and music were flashier than usual, likely tailored to suit the envoys. Yet, they looked bored. They're supposedly cousins who share the same grandfather, but look like twins. If it was these two, the mirror story Gao Shun mentioned might actually be possible. The envoy adorning red jewelry suddenly stood up, giving her graceful greetings to the emperor. She told him she wished they could sit a bit closer to each other, and that it was a shame his younger brother was absent, as she wished to meet him. Mao Mao saw this boldness as quite scary. It was obvious that the true purpose of the special envoys was to gain the favor of the emperor and his brother, securing marriage ties with them for political reasons. Aileen came up to stop her cousin Ayla, feigning an excuse that they should sit down and observe the rare performance ongoing. Taking her cue, Mao Mao went back to the nearby building to pick up the moon goddess. With the two cousins riding back to their rooms after the show, they were suddenly stopped as Mao Mao presented Jin Shi dressed as a woman. He showed off a beautiful dance mixed with the light of the moths, captivating the envoys before disappearing. Ayla shook Mao Mao, asking to see the moon fairy once more. But all Mao Mao did was point to the moon and say, Diana, the name of the moon goddess from the west. Things went all according to plan. Removing the black cloth in the dark, it made Jinshi seem like he suddenly appeared. And as for the moths, which were the key to this charade, among some insects, scent is emitted to attract the opposite sex. With female bug carcass having been wiped on the madam's outfit, it was likely males swarmed her, looking like moon spirits dancing in the light. Jinshi was not happy, however, having had to swim across the pond just to make it back here. So, he made Mao Mao wipe him down. On another day, we learned Xiaolan is attending the new school Jinshi opened. Mao Mao found herself a little bored now. The quack doctor was likely busy still dealing with the perfume incident, which still wasn't over. Even if each individual amount was small, the scent could become poisonous depending on the combination. And while Jinshi had the eunuchs take away all the dangerous scents, there might still be some pavilions keeping them. Out of all the 4 high-ranking consorts, considering their family's power, the most important one would be Consort Lulan. Her father was Shisho, a favored minister who was highly regarded by the previous emperor. The current emperor visits him regularly, but his enthusiasm doesn't seem very high. The next highest-ranking consort was Li Hua, but due to being a relative of the emperor, she wasn't the ambitious type. She fell ill after losing her crown prince, but now has regained the emperor's favor. On the other hand, the family of consort Li Shu, who has risen in rank in recent generations, was so ambitious, having offered their young daughter to the previous emperor. However, the current emperor preferred fuller-bodied women, and even after consort Ardua left, she hasn't become his consort. On the other hand, the emperor favored Gyokuyo the most. In addition to having their daughter, Princess Ling Li, she was pregnant with the emperor's child again. Her homeland in the west was also prosperous from trade, but the land itself was barren and unprosperous. She was twice a victim of attempted assassination by poison. The mystery left unsolved was who poisoned her back when she was pregnant with Ling Li. The culprit could have been the mid-ranking consort who died in the recent mushroom incident, but even then, how did the mid-ranking consort acquire knowledge of poison? Was it Sui Rei? Her whereabouts were still unknown though. Coming across the ladies of the Crystal Pavilion, many of them fled except for the tallest one who didn't seem to wear any perfume. Mao Mao thought it was unusual in the fashion-conscious Crystal Palace, but didn't think much more of it. Meeting with her fellow ladies-in-waiting, Ailan seemed to have contracted a slight fever. After giving her medicine, Mao Mao took her to the clinic in the northern part of the palace, where Shen Lu offered to take her in. Mao Mao could see this middle-aged woman was much better at diagnosis than the quack doctor. Seeing the excellent conditions of the entire place, Mao Mao was suddenly pulled back by Shenlu, who told her she couldn't slack off just because she was accompanying Ailan. After quickly leaving, Mao Mao noticed the clinic was filled with older women. In the rear palace, older women were usually replaced, but in the clinic, experience and knowledge were likely necessary. She suddenly bumped into Jinshi, who told her not to mumble to herself as she walked, or she'd trip. Mao Mao asked why this place wasn't the main medical office. So, Jinshi and Zhao Shun explained that would be great, except only men could be medical officers, and thus were the only ones that could prepare medicine. Jinshi wanted to find a different way to recruit medical officers in the future, so that one could become one without being a eunuch. Mao Mao thought about this. After the current emperor took the throne, the surgery to become a eunuch was banned, so in the future, it's clear there would be a shortage of manpower. She assumed Jinshi definitely had the surgery before it was banned, and offered her mumbling prayers for him. With the guys taking off, Jinshi warned her to make sure no one else knew she was preparing medicine. But later that night, Shenlu had discovered from Ailan that Mao Mao had made her medicine. Mao Mao learns she was summoned by Shenlu. Ailan explains they simply wanted to borrow her for a bit. Getting escorted by Yinghua and finally sitting down, Mao Mao noticed Shenlu's eyes had a greenish hue. Perhaps she was from the western region like Lady Gyokuyo. Yesterday, she seemed like a strong-willed mother, but now that they were talking calmly, she gave off an intelligent impression. Shenlu apologized for her rude demeanor the other day. She didn't realize Mao Mao was working for a consort. Consort. Palace women from the outside often used official titles to refer to them. Shenlu summoned Mao Mao here as a plea to have her make medicine for a nice maid that served the Crystal Pavilion. Yinghua stood up in anger, knowing this could jeopardize Mao Mao's life if word were to get out about her making medicine. Mao Mao was fine though, so Shenlu explained. There was a maid she'd become acquainted with at the laundry area. Since the caravan season, the maid had been experiencing fatigue and a slight fever. It escalated to a strange cough, so she told the maid to get proper rest. But after that, the maid completely stopped showing up. She hadn't gone to the clinic once. Perhaps she couldn't get permission from her superiors. Mao Mao knew that was a problem in the Crystal Pavilion. If the maid needed permission, it wouldn't be from Lady Lihua, but from the head attendant. There's a high chance her request was ignored. Shenlu disclosed it had been half a month since she last saw the maid. The situation was troublesome. Yinghua wondered if a maid like that even existed. Mao Mao knew if the cough was contagious, they couldn't just leave it be. It might spread outside the Crystal Pavilion. Yinghua could tell this all bothered Mao Mao, and warned her to make sure she asked for permission properly before proceeding. She pointed out Mao Mao's bad habit of rushing ahead, and while Mao Mao took her words to heart, she couldn't help but gain cat-like curiosity over a squirming tail in the grass. She wanted to make it into medicine, but the sight of it was too frightening for Yinghua. Scolding one of the maids, the Crystal Pavilion's head lady-in-waiting got alerted of a doctor visiting from the medical office. Seeing the sight of Guan, the other ladies-in-waiting criticized his inability to save Li Hua's first dead child. He explained he was here to meet the wise consort, and when given trouble by Shin, the mysterious, tall woman whispered his advice on what to say. Guan then presented his permissions from Jinshi. Inside, Guan brought up the excellent conditions here in the Crystal Pavilion, and in response, Shin agreed with an air of snobbiness. Because all attendants of this pavilion came from distinguished families, they were all worthy of serving the emperor. Lady Li Hua was also of noble birth, being a distant cousin within the royal family. But Shin also felt the same way about herself. She remembered her grandfather telling her and Li Hua when they were younger that it was important to gain the emperor's favor. The tall woman then had Guan ask about the small building, to which Shin said was nothing more than a storage room. He then asked about the garden, and Shin didn't recognize the particular bushes that sat beside the building. Then finally, Mao Mao spoke of Shin's particular perfume smell today. Shin could hardly believe this was the same girl who'd been snooping around before. But this was all a diversion so that Guan could head towards the building, where inside, they discovered the sickly maid who'd gone missing. Mao Mao began treatment immediately, asking why Shin treated her this way. Shin was cold, responding this method was simply to prevent the disease from spreading. However, Mao Mao presented the bloody napkin, claiming the disease was both contagious and, if untreated, surely fatal for this maid. Mao Mao remembered when she had first come to this pavilion. A fragrance was burned to mask the smell of the sickly Li Hua then. This time, she felt it was the opposite. This sickly person was placed here to mask the smell of the fragrance. Then, with Mao Mao walking over, Shin became frantic, discovering the recently banned perfumes from the caravan. Smelling one, Mao Mao smirked. She pointed out that while each small bottle may not be considered poisonous, being mixed together, it'd create an abortion pill. Shin was distraught. After Mao Mao changed, it was the battle to ascertain Shin's motive. Jinshi questioned why this palace had the banned perfumes, but Shin remained silent. Shin was the head attendant and also the cousin of Lady Li Hua. Her features were somewhat similar, attracting attention. She was an evidently proud and beautiful woman. That's why she became the head. Beautiful flowers were more noticeable when gathered in one place. Given her status, it's not surprising she moved up to a middle-level consort. Jinshi then changed the question. He asked what she was trying to do with the prohibited goods. Shin played coy, denying any involvement with them. She did instruct the sick maid to be laid down in the storage room, however, in order to prevent disease spread. Mao Mao knew it wasn't a crime to isolate the maid there. It can't be helped. That's how little a maid's life is valued. Shin then turned this towards Mao Mao, claiming it was more problematic that she was snooping around another palace's storage room. She used this example to say anyone could have approached the storage room. So where was the evidence the perfume belonged to her? And even if they asked that maid, she was sick and delirious. They could never take her word over Shin's. Mao Mao found a hole. It was unusually kind of Shin to go out of her way to check on a lowly maid's condition. But what was equally surprising was the scent of perfume oil that lingered on Shin's body, when before she had worn none. Mao Mao pulled out a perfume, the same one Shin smelled like, and going to confirm the scent, Shin shrunk back, striking Mao Mao's face for trying to reach out. Fine, if Mao Mao was too low ranked, then Jinshi could do it instead. However, Li Hua preferred to handle it personally. She first asked what crime Shin would be charged with, then learned creating an abortion pill equated to killing the emperor's child. Li Hua wondered if the charge would be the same, even if Shin was targeting her. Now Mao Mao could see what this was all about. Li Hua's clothing was similar to Gyokuyo's. She was pregnant. And that's why there also weren't any decent attendants around. These attendants had been gathered by head attendant Shin. Li Hua pointed out how Shin had never actually treated her as a consort, that Shin thought she wasn't worthy of being the mother of the nation. Shin hated being talked down to by Li Hua. She freaked out over how she was always better at studying and etiquette. Shin had always been praised for being better than Li Hua in many ways. Mao Mao could see was probably the size of their chests. Intrusive thoughts. Ahem. The difference in capacity between them was simply too vast. Li Hua and Shin, pear and apricot, both were born with beautiful names, having a good background in education. Still, there were plenty of foolish people who were ruled by their emotions and made mistakes. Lady Shin just happened to be one of them. Shin didn't think Li Hua was any better just because she was the head of the family. She herself had been raised to become the mother of the nation. Grabbing the crate of perfumes to throw, she cursed at Li Hua to wither in the flower garden, while being unable to bear children. But Gao Shan caught her. Mao Mao got right in front of Shin's face, pointing out that she seemed to love the position as mother of the nation, unlike Li Hua. Li Hua then came forward and struck her cousin gracefully, then declared her dismissal of her head attendant. If the slap wasn't enough, she was willing to do more, and Mao Mao giggled, seeing how bold and strong Li Hua had become. Shin was given a light punishment, now forbidden to enter the rear palace. But humiliation was punishment enough for a woman as proud as Shin. Even if she wanted revenge, she wouldn't be able to do anything since she was driven out by a scandal. Afterward, Jinshi offered his napkin, and Mao Mao felt it was such a shame to stain such fine silk. He then inquired on how she knew the maid was in the storage room. Mao Mao didn't know at first, but had a hunch because of the bushes next to it. Normally, the flowers were red, so someone must have chosen these white ones and planted them. In feng shui, the combination of green and white was said to be good for health. Mao Mao then brought up how strange it was Shin knew what perfumes could be used as an abortion drug. There were still too many unknowns. In his youth, Jinshi was approached by a strange man within the palace. His mother intervened, but when another woman approached, she bowed with an expression Jinshi still couldn't understand to this day. He still couldn't remember who those strangers were at the time. He woke up panting from his dream. Practicing the sword to cool off, he recounted how he later learned the old man was his father, and the old woman was his grandmother. and the man he always thought was his father turned out to be his brother. He wondered if Mao Mao noticed by now, because if so, he'd be relieved. Heading to the newly established schools, he spotted Mao Mao peeking into the classroom. She peered at a textbook. They were teaching the founding legend of the country. Jinshi then snuck up on her, but she wasn't fazed at this point. She just wanted to study, but couldn't focus with this creature standing beside her. They noted the attendance of only 20 students, and while that might seem small, the participant size has grown since it was originally only 10. Mao Mao knew if the maids were to become literate, that would change the very nature of the rear palace. At this point, Xiaolan has progressed to the stage where she could read simple stories. After class finished, Mao Mao joined Xiaolan next door, where she was receiving extracurricular help for her studies. However, Mao Mao could only fixate on the old shrine across the water, since its architectural design was quite unusual. The teacher then explained that the shrine was built by the people who originally lived in this land. Then, when Queen Wangmu took control of the region, she did not reject the old faiths. She was the mother of the first emperor, and told this to her son. Anyone who rules this land must pass through that shrine, and only those who choose the right path shall become the ruler of this land. Her son had done just that, and thus became emperor. The reason the capital was relocated to this place was because of that shrine. However, it hasn't been used for decades now. The previous emperor's older brothers all perished due to a widespread illness. The only one left was the previous emperor. So, the decision was made without the need for the passage ritual. The teacher was happy that Mao Mao took such an interest in the shrine. The last one to do the same was a peculiar court physician who wandered around the rear palace in his free time. The teacher was surprised to hear that the court physician was Mao Mao's foster father. After doing her usual poison testing for Gyokuyo's family, the emperor told Mao Mao he wanted her to accompany him to the shrine of choosing, and it was there they met with the teacher again. The emperor wanted both Mao Mao and Jinshi to accompany him through it, a surprising request, and inside, they were met with 3 doors and a sign that read, "Do not pass through the red door." The emperor went with blue last time, so this time, he chose green. The next room had 3 doors again, and a sign that read, "Do not pass through the brown door." Door after door, room after room, up, down, turning back around, Mao Mao completely lost their sense of direction. She felt like they were just going in circles. She wondered why the emperor brought her here. She wanted this to end soon. They reached the final set of doors and a sign that read, "Do not pass through the blue door." Mao Mao noticed another door that led to this room and wondered if there was another path that merged here. The emperor then chose the yellow door, and inside was a closed-off room with a sign that read, "Child of Royalty, yet not the child of Wang Mu." The same result as last time. After leaving, Mao Mao pondered more on what happened. Was there a trick to the number of rooms? The doors chosen. The teacher then came by and mentioned her father would know. She knows her father was certainly knowledgeable, but at the same time, being told this was beyond her really pissed her off. She took a deep breath and considered the colors and the words on all of the signs. Something clicked. In the lore of the founding of this land, the first emperor's mother was always mentioned, but never the father. One would expect that from this, maternal lineage would be valued. Yet, in reality, succession was passed through males. She then asked if the former emperor's brothers were full siblings. The emperor answered, not all of them, but he had heard the mothers of the imperial princes were sisters. She then asked if many of the emperors had poor eyesight, and the emperor responded that while that was true, his father, the previous, had good vision. This was all she needed. She asked to enter the shrine once more, but the teacher teased the idea of that not being good. After all, she was neither a consort nor a princess. The emperor then joked about elevating her to the rank of consort, although convincing her father Lomen would be troublesome. The emperor laughed and asked if they would be allowed with Jinshi taking the lead this time. Mao Mao chose the blue door, then light blue, and continuing to pick, she knew it could only be doors a child of Wang Mu would choose. The key was the color. They reached a room where a sign read, "Pass through the red door." Yet, there was only green, purple, and white. Mao Mao chose green, and both Jinshi and the emperor were surprised to see the view of the palace. The teacher explained that long ago, those chosen by Queen Wang Mu to be king would swear an oath to the people, and if no one could choose this path, they would return to the shrine with a consort who could. Normally, someone who inherited the rightful blood would do it, but this time, it was someone outside of that. The emperor had Mao Mao explain the solution. In the legend, it was said that Queen Wang Mu possessed eyes that could see through darkness. Those who carried her blood are said to have eyes that could not distinguish colors. At first, There were the doors blue, red, and green, with the instructions that read, "Do not pass through the red door." The child of the queen would have chosen blue, since a colorblind person could not distinguish between red and green, and all the other doors followed this same logic. The queen had come to this land from the distant west. With Mau Mau bringing up she married the most powerful leader in this land, Jinshi was surprised because the legend spoke of her not having a husband. But that's what made this queen so cunning. To ensure her bloodline would always remain, the Shrine of Choosing preserved her trait of color blindness. The teacher was impressed by Mau Mau being able to solve all of this. It was said Queen Wangmu ruled this land because of her exceptional wisdom, so he suggested Mau Mau be incorporated into the royal bloodline. Another joke that gave the emperor a hearty laugh. First and foremost, the emperor didn't want to make an enemy out of her father, but also, he thought her chest was lacking about 15 centimeters or so. Back when Mau Mau had scared Jinghua with the tail she found on the ground, she learned enough troublemaking would lead her to being punished by having to live in the shed. Mau Mau was excited about this though, since the shed was bigger than her room, and she could make noise late at night. So, reaching the day of her punishment by Hong Yang, she was overjoyed. She put dry medicinal herbs there, medicines there. A punishment like this was exactly what Mau Mau wanted. There was apparently a rumor going around about a strange court lady catching bugs, but Mau Mau hadn't been doing anything like that as of late. She realized it must be Shisui. This matter was becoming troublesome, so she decided to ask Xiaolan, even offering Xiaolan's fellow laundry servants Jinshi's handkerchief in exchange for information. She eventually went to the north area, where Shisui was usually seen, and stumbled upon the same kind of flowers that were planted by the shed at the Crystal Pavilion. She remembered when she was little, she used to pick the seeds all the time with the courtesans. However, the powder inside wasn't used as face powder, but instead to make abortion pills. This pill could also be made with other flowers such as Chinese lantern plants, peonies, balsam, and quicksilver. Outside of the quicksilver, the rest of the flowers could be obtained within the rear palace. Yet, Shin sourced the abortion pill supplies brought in by the caravan. In other words, the person who taught Shin had no knowledge of medicine or making poison. Shisui suddenly jumped out of the bush, chasing after a bug, then grabbed one right on Mau Mau's head, accidentally squishing it. After Mau Mau washed off, Shisui sat her down, shouting her vast knowledge of the bug and everything she knew about it. They then suddenly heard the sounds of instruments, and the Empress Dowager came walking by. Mau Mau saw her at last year's garden party, and wow, she looked so young. Hard to believe she was the Emperor's mother. Seeing her heading to the clinic, Shisui explained the Empress was the one who established it. She admired the Emperor's kindness, adding that the ban on eunuch surgery and slavery was also due to her influence. From a humanity perspective, abolishing slavery was a good thing, but putting aside those treated like livestock, cases where maids used themselves as collateral for debt were considered legally similar to employment. Even though from an outsider's view, there was little difference between a maid and a slave. The madam was really nervous when the abolition was decided. Officially, slavery had been abolished, but it was common knowledge that it still existed under a different name. The Empress eventually came to visit the Jade Pavilion. It was evident the Empress knew about Gyokuyo's pregnancy, so she must be a really trusted person. Rather than a mother and daughter-in-law, the two looked more like friends with a bit of an age gap. The Empress confirmed that Mau Mau was the attendant Jinshi had chosen. This knowledge was given to her by Sui Ren, who used to be her direct attendant. Gyokuyo made the excuse to put Ling Li to bed, so the Empress could speak with Mau Mau privately. She apparently wanted Mau Mau to figure out if she had put a curse on her late husband. Mau Mau reflected later in her room, thinking about how she hadn't heard anything good about the previous emperor. He was a foolish brother, a dim-witted lord, a puppet of the Empress Regnant. But the most well-known thing about him in the palace was his attraction to young girls. The Empress Dowager had a scar on her stomach, because giving birth to the current emperor, her body was still not fully developed. So he was cut out of her stomach, and the one who was forcibly made into a eunuch just to assist in that childbirth was Mau Mau's unfortunate father. A few days later, the Empress arranged a tea party, bringing together the 4 high-ranking consorts. She had called for Mau Mau again directly, and Mau Mau was shown a room no one was permitted to enter. During the reign of the emperor before last, an attendant who became a consort of lower rank lived here. This was the room of the late Empress Regnant, the place where the late emperor was raised, and where the Empress Regnant had passed away. In his later years, the late emperor and his mother, who was called the late Empress Regnant, began spending more and more time secluded in that room. As if clinging to memories, He immersed himself there. Perhaps the late emperor had grown weak in spirit, because after his mother passed away, he followed shortly after, drawing his last breath in that room. He lived a full life, so why did Empress Dowager Anshi believe he was cursed? Well, she cursed him. She wished he would disappear, night after night, for so long. The suspicion this was a curse? The late emperor's body was enshrined in a mausoleum for a year, and the following year, the emperor and Lady Anshi viewed the late emperor's remains before the burial. But when they saw the body, it was almost exactly the same as when he had passed. No decay. The outbuilding would soon be demolished. Mao Mao was instructed to investigate Empress Anshi's curse, the reason the late emperor's body remained unchanged from when he was alive. It had been 6 years since the previous emperor passed, and with that outbuilding gone, only his tomb would remain. If the mystery remains unsolved, Anshi's heart will never be at peace. To solve it, Mao Mao was granted access to the room where the late emperor once resided. She spent the night there with Sui Ren, and stumbled upon a toy box that belonged to Jin Shi. It was a particular toy Sui Ren used to always hide from him, and Gao Shen would struggle to find new toys to get Jin Shi to stop crying. She'd take it away from him, believing when someone became too attached to one thing, they couldn't see anything else. And he was born into a position where that simply wasn't allowed. He had to grow up quickly and act mature. That was his mother's wish. Mao Mao's heard that growing up in a repressive environment can affect the heart. She's gradually shown her his childish side. It was probably a part of his true nature. She then picked up a colorful stone that Sui Ren had taken from Jin Shi as a child. Taking it away was a correct call by Sui Ren, because Mao Mao determined it was poisonous. Mao Mao had the key to the mystery now. The smell in the emperor's childhood room was particular. Mao Mao learned that the old emperor liked to paint, and that the walls were unusually soft and probably reinforced. They brought one of the old servants that used to tend to the emperor, who was also mute. Since he could not speak, Mao Mao just had him nod to her questions. He didn't respond, but instead became frightened, with Mao Mao gaining permission to remove some of the wall, and revealed behind was the true talent of the emperor's painting. The orange-colored robe was likely made from pigment ground from orpiment stone. Orpiment shared the same properties as arsenic, and arsenic has a preservative effect, preventing decay. Painting over time, the arsenic contained in the orpiment was likely absorbed gradually into the late emperor's body. By the time of his death, it likely spread throughout his entire body. He continued to paint in secret, right in this room. For an emperor to engage in painting, such a thing would be considered unthinkable. That's how people around him would see it. So, he never made his works public, which is why he entrusted a mute servant to tend to this room. Mao Mao touched the wall, noticing there were even more layers beneath. The one who prepared the materials was likely the late emperor's mother. She must have known her own child wasn't fit to be emperor, so to protect her son, she gathered power under herself, even if it meant being called the Empress in her own right. The Empress, who did everything for her child, ultimately granted him this room, and the tools to paint with it, unaware they were poisonous. Such irony. Anshi later touched the painting with thoughts of irritation. She could feel his presence within his work. She wasn't in this painting, believing herself a mere fleeting existence passing by. It was only thanks to the scar of her C-section that she now stood as the mother of the nation. By chance, she fell into the late emperor's hands and conceived a child. Many voices pitied such a girl, and surely such a girl existed. But she had known of the emperor's perversions from the start. Her father was a civil servant, and her mother was a concubine. Given Anshi had matured early, her father used her as a convenient tool. She entered the rear palace as an attendant to a mid-ranking consort. The consort was her half-sister, who was raised with care and affection, and had no way of knowing their father's true intentions. When they met with the emperor then, he shoved Anshi's sister aside, and even as a young child, Anshi could tell the man was unfit to stand atop the nation. As an attendant, she should have either comforted the consort or apologized for any disrespect toward the emperor. But instead, she stood before him, full of ambition. She bore his child and faced death's shadow countless times. She was fortunate her child was a boy, and the empress acknowledged the child as her grandson. There was once a woman who bore a daughter and claimed the girl was the late emperor's child, but the emperor denied any knowledge of her. The medical officer accused of being the father was also exiled along with the child. At that time, only medical officers were spared from castration in the rear palace, but from then on, even they were forced to undergo it. Anshi felt sympathy for the man that performed her C-section, since he was castrated too. Time would pass, and Anshi would no longer appear as a young girl. From that point, the late emperor never came to see her, existing solely as a puppet of the empress. The emperor was a pathetic man who could only converse properly with young girls. Seeing him making moves on a young servant girl, Anshi couldn't forgive him. She often tormented him in their bedchambers until he trembled and begged for forgiveness. The young girls who had been touched by him, his mother, the empress, Anshi wanted to imprint memories of herself onto him more than them. After that, his spirit broke, and he withdrew into his old room. No one felt the urge to question the reason. In the end, he only pictured his mother and ambitionless daughters in this picture. He only painted Anshi once. Even though she cherished that picture, she told Sui Ren to throw it away. Seeing Jinshi, she could see her late husband's image within him. Jinshi was still a child she deeply cared for. Today, the Jade Pavilion welcomed in 3 new ladies-in-waiting, sisters Haku-u, Koku-u, and Seki-u. Hinghwa was already familiar with them since they were all from the same hometown. The eldest, Haku-u, was the same age as Gyokuyo. Since Mao Mao couldn't tell them apart, the sisters decided they'd wear hairbands that matched the colors in their names. With the new ladies-in-waiting, the amount of work per person went down dramatically. Given Gyokuyo's pregnancy, the pavilion needed more workers than ever. Later, Hinghwa somehow coerced Mao Mao to go out with her in the evening, out in a secluded shed on the north side, where an older court lady was telling them 13 tales. Mao Mao could tell Yinghua got easily scared. During the last tale, the court lady creepily shouted, "It's your turn next," causing Mao Mao to jolt up from almost falling asleep. Opening the window, she knew why everyone was slowly knocking out over the course of the stories being told. After getting everyone fresh air and awakening them, the mysterious lady disappeared. Coming back, Hong Yang thought something weird would happen, given the event organizer was new. The court lady who usually organized the events passed away last year. She actually had relations with the late emperor, and had said the gatherings were the only fun she ever had. Now Yinghua was shocked, because the organizer had told a story about the late emperor deflowering young girls. Perhaps that was the lady's own experience, or a prank pulled by someone in the know. Yinghua was so scared, she decided to sleep with Mao Mao for the night. Getting ready for the day, Jinshi thought about Empress Dowager Anshi's words, telling him to hide his favorite woman, lest someone else take her from him. He was going to take Mao Mao on an expedition tomorrow, and by doing this, he wouldn't be able to hide his secret from her anymore. He was invited to a hunting trip for a few days by Master Shisho, and he and Gyokuyo were suddenly arguing back and forth over who Mao Mao belonged to. Then, the consort pulled out her trump card. She knew Gao Shun had called Mao Mao Xiao Mao, but come to think of it, Jinshi had never called her by name. Gyokuyo got a laugh out of this, while making Jinshi so uncomfortable. The character used to write the name of the nation, Li, also depicted the story of its founding, 3 swords under grass. Grass is for flower, representing the Mother Royal, ancestor of the Emperor. The 3 swords under it represent the 3 warriors who helped her. Of the 3 swords, the one larger sword represents the Shihokushu, the northern lands. That entire area grows sorghum and wheat. If you go further north, you enter a mountainous region. Mao Mao woke up, having slept through Basen's lecture. Shihokushu was the land controlled by Shisho's clan. Since Gao Shun was also invited to hunt, his son Basen was here attending as Jinshi's personal aide. With its high altitude and chilly weather, this region was the late emperor's favorite summer resort, and he visited yearly. Members of the imperial family hadn't visited during the current emperor's reign, but Shisho's clan continues to manage the area. Meeting where they were staying, Mao Mao thought the room was strangely warm. She wondered why Jinshi was relaxing this way, and why he had a face mask. Did he need to hide his beauty whenever he left the room? Jinshi could be called his normal name inside, but outside, he needed them to refer to him as Kosen. Mao Mao wondered what was going on, but both Jinshi and Gao Shun seemed reluctant to answer, and the two seemed more different in rank than they usually did. Basen explained his family served Master Kosen's family for many generations, so now, Mao Mao could see Jinshi was from a good family after all. Whispering aside, Gao Shun explained to Basen that Mao Mao was completely unaware of Jinshi's true identity, but Jinshi planned to tell her soon. She did her food tasting in the evening, and despite the meal not being poisoned, Jinshi refused to eat it, so she ate it instead. Jinshi then offered some to Basen, but the liquor was so strong, he passed out. Mao Mao's tolerance for poison was just a lot better. Sitting in the bath, Mao Mao noted its extravagance. Knowing the hunt started tomorrow, she hoped there wouldn't be an incident. However, some shady men were outside in the rain, observing the latest model of guns with improved range and accuracy, saying they were going to kill some people. The hunt took place at a location half an hour away by horse, then 1 hour up the mountain by foot. Supposedly, they were going to cook the game caught on the spot. With nothing to do, Mao Mao decided to take a walk. She jump-scared Lee Haku playing with the dog. He was invited to join the guards, but they made him take care of the dog instead. Since he was from the countryside, Mao Mao surmised the other prideful guards must have pushed him out. Even with him climbing the ranks, he was surely being met with resistance. He blew his dog whistle, noting the dog could be summoned from miles away. Mao Mao thought it was interesting to see the dog petting a dog. She thought summer resorts should be cool, but the skies were too clear today and it was very hot. Getting comfortable wasn't easy. Even in this heat, Jinshi wouldn't take off his mask or eat the food. Despite his suspicious mask, it was clear given his seat that he must be the most important person at this party. She noticed Master Shisho, Consort Lolan's father. With the heat, Jinshi was getting dizzy. He decided to step outside, and so, Mao Mao quickly followed after him. As she wiped him down, Jinshi was about to admit his secret, but they were interrupted by gunfire. He picked Mao Mao up and sprinted off, jumping down into a waterfall. The assailants wondered if they should search, considering no one would be able to survive a fall from this height. But more important at the moment, they needed to hide the guns. In a small cave, Jinshi resuscitated Mao Mao with CPR. She thought he was crazy for the nearly 50-meter jump. She quickly got undressed, ignoring Jinshi's protest. She didn't want to catch a cold. She kept her undergarments on. Even though her body was just a set of skinny ribs, she wanted to hide what she could. While he wrung out his clothes, she offered him some butterbur she saved from breakfast. She believed he could use the salt from it right now. She touched his face, bringing up that he'd gone hunting in his mask without eating or drinking. Was he not suffering from a headache from the lack of hydration? He heard her stomach rumble and offered her some too, causing her to back away and quickly grab one, thanking him as she ate. They went to the exit, and Mao Mao had to climb on top of Jinshi to touch the exit. However, she fell over because of a frog, causing the two to end up in an interesting position. She tried to get off, but he pulled her back in. Basen observed several high-ranking officials had realized what was going on, and he immediately began a search. However, they were laughing at Jinshi for taking off with a servant girl. Basen had sent men out to search, but still no updates. Lying on top of Jinshi, Mao Mao noted his warmth and faint smell of incense. But more importantly, what was this lump she was feeling? The frog from earlier? It seemed too big for that. He asked her to move her hand away, but it couldn't be. A eunuch shouldn't have it prior to entering the rear palace, but it was. She could now clearly see his build was unlike that of a normal eunuch. There were so many other hints, but she'd been subconsciously avoiding all of them. He was relieved in a way, because now he didn't have to go through as much trouble explaining. He was ready to tell her the truth, but she didn't want it, knowing she'd have to take it to her grave. She interjected by saying she might have crushed a frog, and even though he tried to tell her it wasn't a frog, she blocked his words off, insisting it was indeed a frog. The two bickered about this idea, and then Mao Mao wiped her hand, explaining frogs were pretty gross since they got slimy. But he put her down, now with him on top of her. She realized she must have provoked him too much. He pulled his lips closer and closer to hers. But hearing a noise, Mao Mao whistled, and the dog came down to interrupt Jinshi's mood. The Haku pulled them out and learned about the series of events. They wanted to find the assailants, and with the dog, Mao Mao had a plan. Back at the banquet, Basen received a bloodied piece of Jinshi's garments. The reporting man explained they had found it on a rock by the river. No one else was in the area, and there were rapids ahead. The men panicked to send additional search parties, but with us now seeing the reporter was Lihaku, Basen knew Jinshi was planning something. They found more bloodied garments, and a broken arrow with a falcon feather. They had everyone's luggage searched, and a man who had similar arrows began to panic, assuring them he knew nothing about the attack. He claimed someone must have stolen one of his arrows to entrap him. Basen noted Lowen's panic to be genuine, and that his men weren't reacting unnaturally either. With there being orders to search the forest now, one of the actual assailants sprinted to where they had buried one of the guns. He had no idea what the arrow was about. But that didn't matter. Mao Mao had already beaten him to what he was looking for. He tried to take the gun back, but Li Haku restrained him. They found the gun, thanks to the dog. Mao Mao explained they found 3 of them, and Jinshi noted it was foreign made, likely the latest model from the West. He fired a test shot, and quickly concluded how it functioned. Mao Mao added that gunpowder was made from coal, saltpeter, and sulfur. When it exploded, it emitted a strong smell like a rotten egg. The dog picked up on it right away, and found the person who had the same smell of the gunpowder on them, the shooter. After the incident, the disappearance during the day was written off as the masked lord's whimsy. It became public knowledge that, during that party, a certain official and his party disappeared. They would never be seen in public again. During the late-night party, a party-goer told Gao Shun he heard the masked lord had a terrible burn scar on his face. He wondered if the emperor was worried about having a crown prince like him. Gao Shun knew everyone was trying to determine if the emperor's younger brother was fit to take over the throne. Mao Mao was uncomfortable about this ending. It was just like the other time. So many things were unanswered, like where the assailants got the gun, and what they really wanted, and so on. The West. She assumed the story about the girls sneaking out and tricking their guards were about the envoys from the West. Had they really snuck out to be with a man? Or was it to deliver the guns? She hoped to learn something from the culprits. She was startled, hearing Jinshi calling for her. He apologized for earlier in the cave, and she apologized as well, for calling it only somewhat large. She thinks that must have hurt his pride, but she was totally off base here. She wondered what he was thinking. She'd always been slow when it came to understanding human feelings. The big sisters who raised her were hard-working courtesans. No matter how much she cried, they left her alone until they were done with work. She heard it didn't take long for her to learn to stop crying. That might be why she was slow to notice how others feel about her, good and bad. She also had no idea what to say in these situations. She told him she wouldn't breathe a word of his secret, and no matter what, he'd always be Master Jinshi to her. Those were her honest feelings. Whether he still had his balls or not had nothing to do with her. It's not like she was going to see them anyway. He suddenly opened the door, giving what he had been promising for a while. The ox bezoar lit up her soul. This was the rarest of rare medicines she only saw in her dreams, and now it was in her hands. She thanked him with a bright blush on her face, shutting him out and wishing him a good night. On another day at the palace, Xiaolon wondered where she was going to find work. Her term of service here was over in 6 months. Mao Mao recounted how Xiaolon used to just be a gossipy girl. Now, as one of the first students at the new school, she studied hard. She wanted Xiaolon to find a good place for work after her time here. She considered recommending Xiaolon to the verdigris house, since she had a good face and was sociable. More importantly, she was honest and easy to train. The madam would easily hire her, but even then, she'd only suggest offering it as a last, final, desperate choice. Shisui then came by, bringing up that she knew where to make connections. In the bathhouse, Mao Mao commented that Shisui's clothes made her look smaller. Shisui wondered where Mao Mao was looking, but this was just a habit of hers. They enjoyed the bath pleasantries, until Shisui finally remembered Xiaolon was looking for connections. They ended up massaging a mid-ranking courtesan, and given Mao Mao had experience with bountiful ladies due to her time at the verdigris house, she assisted in unwanted hair removal. Mao Mao later reported what she'd done for the day to Gyokuyo, who was happy knowing people often dropped their guard in bathhouses, and sometimes told interesting stories. She wanted Mao Mao to report palace rumors to her, if she heard any. Gyokuyo was right. Mao Mao heard rumors of Lady Gyokuyo's pregnancy in the bathhouse, and it was pretty widespread. People were already talking about the sex of the baby, and when they were due. Occasionally, people speculated on Lady Li Hua being pregnant as well, but more often than that, she heard about how Lulan might be pregnant too. It's been over 6 months since Lulan arrived. As the daughter of Master Shisho, an important official since the last emperor's reign, she became a high-ranking concubine with huge fanfare. The emperor had to spend time with her. That meant 3 of the 4 high-ranking concubines were pregnant, a cause for both celebration and caution. The other rumor they heard was of a good-looking eunuch. 30 new ones had joined. Shisui explained they were former slaves who had been castrated and escaped from foreign countries. Mao Mao noted Shisui's keen perceptive skills. She then spotted Li Shu and wondered what she was doing here. Later, sitting with the 3 sisters, Mao Mao felt daggers staring at her. They were concerned about why she was so close with Gyokuyo. Mao Mao answered cut and dry that she was just a poison taste tester. but now realized it seemed suspicious that she often hung out with people not of the Jade Pavilion, and so she invited them to the bathhouse sometime. And the youngest, Sekiu, was flustered knowing she'd be going, and she screamed getting undressed by Xiaolon and Shisui. The four worked together to coax courtesans throughout the day, until Mao Mao spotted Li Shu again. She saw Li Shu and her new lady-in-waiting trip over slick flooring, and deciding to help them out, they shrieked at Mao Mao in fear. She noticed razor rashes on Li Shu's arms and dragged her off to help, using the technique she did with everyone else. After massaging Li Shu, they relaxed with some juice, and Mao Mao wanted to know why she was coming to the big bathhouse instead of her own. Li Shu admitted she was scared because the Diamond Pavilion's bathhouse had a ghost. While cleaning, Sekiu remarked that it was unbelievable that Mao Mao would take care of a high-ranking concubine that wasn't Lady Gyokuyo. But after hearing about ghosts in Li Shu's bathhouse, Mao Mao wondered who wouldn't be even a little curious. Getting summoned, Mao Mao saw the smirk on Jinxi's face. The joy of getting the Ox Bazaar made her forget, but she now knew he was the only man in the rear palace aside from the emperor who wasn't castrated, and that he had a somewhat sizable frog. This time, around requesting her services, everyone was shocked to hear Jinxi speak Mao Mao's name, telling them that in regards to resolving the ghost issue, she wouldn't be able to relay any information on it coming back. Mao Mao wondered if maybe the Ox Bazaar wasn't worth the secret she now had to take to her grave. In the Diamond Pavilion, they were shown to Li Shu's bath changing room by her lady-in-waiting, Kanan. Li Shu had seen a strange human figure from the window of this place. However, one of the other ladies-in-waiting claimed Li Shu was just looking for attention. Judging by the arrogance of the woman, Mao Mao guessed she was the former head lady-in-waiting, upset that her role was taken by the poison taster. Mao Mao then took notice of her peculiar hairpin. However, with Jinxi putting his charms to work, he got her to quiet down and all the ladies went to get him a drink. With them gone, Li Shu could speak freely. It was on a night she finished bathing. She usually came to her bath later, preferring a cooler temperature bath as opposed to earlier, where her ladies-in-waiting took theirs much hotter. She came to notice her ladies-in-waiting didn't seem to like her, so she often bathed alone. Then, opening the drapes, she saw the curtains billowing, even though all the windows were closed. A white face appeared, dancing and laughing. She assured Mao Mao it wasn't possible for anyone else to be there. Kanan was the only one nearby, and she saw the ghost as well. She tried approaching it herself, but the curtain stopped moving, like nothing happened. Looking at the area, Mao Mao noted the strange layout. At the Crystal and Jade Pavilions, the baths were in separate buildings, and came with a space to relax after bathing. Why would anyone build a warehouse next to the bath? She then inquired more about the warehouse, and we learned it wasn't always a warehouse. It became a warehouse because of intense mold growth. The ladies at the Jade Pavilion would have done something to prevent the mold, but the ones here didn't seem to be as skilled and proactive, so they could only turn the room into a warehouse and hide it. Seeing the rotted floor, Mao Mao was surprised to learn this building was relatively new. It was built when Lady Li Shu joined the rear palace. That's when Mao Mao noticed something. She went to the bathtub and found a hole connected to the waterways of the rear palace. Being inquisitive, she learned the day Li Shu saw the ghost, she unplugged the bathtub by mistake. Closed windows, moving curtains, and unplugged bathtub. Mao Mao had all the evidence she needed to conclude things. Receiving the pavilion blueprints, she learned the waterway passed under the floor in the warehouse room. With hot water passing under, the vapor made the floor and walls rot easily. Then, the vapor would come up through the gap, causing a wind and moving the curtains. That didn't resolve the round face Li Shu saw though. Mao Mao then lifted the covering from Li Shu's precious copper mirror. It was an heirloom from her late mother. Opened the curtain and had it reflect light. It then projected a face. This was Mao Mao's first time seeing a magic mirror in person. It was a special mirror that could reflect light and turn it into an image or text. They're built by applying bumps into the mirror face. Li Shu got emotional, seeing that the image resembled her mother. The arrogant lady-in-waiting then reappeared, cockily confiscating the mirror from Li Shu, since they had the glass mirrors from the special envoys now. Li Shu then took it back, and Jinxi intervened. He pulled a hairpin out from the arrogant lady's hair, calling it inappropriate for her to wear a pin presenting the crest of a high-ranking concubine. He asked her to refrain from behaving in ways that contradicted with her status, causing her to fall to her knees. In the physician's building, Mao Mao and Guan discussed the new eunuchs that had joined the rear palace. Many of them were supposedly young and good-looking. The other day, They had gotten swarmed by the low-ranking concubines when they were preparing the bath. In Jinxi's office, Gao Shun was telling him to hurry up and tell Mao Mao the truth, before Lo Han interfered. Mao Mao's biological father was the Grand Commandant. He took over as head of his family through force from his father and half-brother. He was a man that even the Emperor respected. Even being Grand Commandant, he didn't belong to any specific group, wandering between people at will. Many tried to subdue him before he caused trouble, but they were all beaten back. The unspoken rule here was, don't interact with him unless necessary. But in order to bring Mao Mao into their camp, Jinxi knew he needed to be dealt with. He wanted to tell Mao Mao the truth about why he was in his current position and why he hid his true self, but wondered how she'd react. The two went to go check on the new eunuchs, and spotted the handsome one everyone was talking about. He had supposedly been heavily abused, causing the left side of his body to go numb, and he didn't want to show his skin since he had scars all over. He indeed was quite popular, apparently very intelligent and quite thoughtful towards women. Now, trouble was afoot, with Xiaolan having accidentally knocked over ice for a high-ranking concubine. Oh man, what's going to happen next? Subscribe to the channel to keep up, but for now, watch this next video. It's me, ComfyTea. I'll see you all in the next one.